allegiance to the flag, United States
of America,
to the republic
republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Andrew Benson. Here. Doug Dake.
Here.
Ron Winlosi.
Here.
Joseph Wetmore.
Here.
Edward Levine.
Here. So, hello, everyone. We're now moving over to item 4 in your packet, which is to set the.
Ed, can you speak closer to your mic, please?
Sure. How's that, better?
Little better. Closer be nicer.
Any closer, it'd be the back of my head.
You can grab both of them and see.
How about now?
A little better.
How about now? I'm gonna have to go to the emergency room to get any closer. These are both on it, right?
They're
Okay.
supposed to be.
Joe, can anyone else hear me, or is it just Joe?
I can hear you fine.
I can hear you, you're just faint. But go ahead.
Okay. Anyways, number 4 in your packet. Got all these microphones. They're important. So, I have a motion to open a public hearing for special use permit, commercial recreation, outdoors, 320 Peruville Road, tax parcel 30-1-30.1.
So moved.
Okay, Andrew's the first and Doug's the second. Time is 6:39. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
So we have to wait a minute.
well, we have to see if anybody for the, here for the public
Yes.
hearing.
Anyone want to comment on this? You do. Okay.
You're having a public hearing.
You just,
State your name.
we just sit on our, we sit on the, everybody sit and we talk.
It's,
So listen, I want the town board.
Okay, first of all, do we have?
Oh, sorry, Mike Sigler, 218 Peruville Road, Freedom, which is in Lansing. No, I just wanted to speak on the public floor, not because I'm for or against this project. Yeah, actually, the project sounds great, and you know, I think I do support this project. So my thing is, so I'm at 218 Peruville Road. So obviously, when I see 320 Peruville Road, I go, that's interesting. What's that? And also, I consider myself a pretty plugged-in individual. I know a lot of people. I read the paper. Literally the first time hearing about this. So I understand. I'm sure we've done everything. We put this in the paper and did a public notice. You know, not that anybody really reads, I think, one of the local newspapers anymore. But I would ask the town board to consider somehow doing this differently. And I think it would, in the future, cause you less headaches. Right? Just because I'm thinking, if I didn't know about this, which is a pretty minor project, right? A daycare center, would be against that, right? But it's literally right down the road from my house. And if I haven't heard about this, that seems peculiar. And I would hope that maybe the town would say, well, that is weird. Why didn't he hear about that? That's, you know, I'm literally not the next door neighbor, but what, 3 houses between us. And I would just like maybe the town to consider maybe a notice. I mean, hey, there's this project and there's going to be a public hearing on this. Because I think we just live in a different world now. I think we used to live in a world where people would get the newspaper and then they would read the notices, and there wasn't quite so many building projects going on. And I would just hope that maybe we can consider, you know, everybody within a certain area. Like, again, this would be, if this was a city, this would be my next block. This would be the 300 block. I'm in the 200 block. I would think that I would know something about that. So, that's just my 2 cents on it. Maybe there is something we can come up with, but that I found interesting and I just hadn't heard about it. But congratulations with the project. It sounds great. And, I'm glad that the fields will get more use than just fields and will, obviously provide a service that is much needed in Tompkins County. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Mike. Does anybody else want to make a comment from the public during this time period? CJ, do you have anybody in the waiting room?
No one in the waiting room for public hearing.
Been 1 minute.
I'm sure it has.
Okay.
Yes, it has.
We need a motion to close.
So we'll need a motion to close the public hearing for the special use permit.
I'll move it.
Was that Doug?
I'll move it, yep.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, we're on to item 5, which is the resolution authorizing special use permit for commercial recreation outdoors Waza Turf Field, 322 Road Road. Would someone like to entertain a motion?
Sure, I'll do it.
I'll second.
We have a first and second.
Yeah. Can you see Jim?
Sure. Which one are we looking at? Highlight it. So CJ, as part of the discussion period, there's a question on the 2 highlighted areas. I don't know if you see them in your packet. I'll be on the second page. It's like 6 paragraphs down.
Yes, that's correct. Tompkins County Department of Planning and Sustainability were required to refer projects like that to them. I anticipate that we will receive a letter that does not recommend any changes other than they would like to see the lighting for the soccer field to be a color temperature of 2700 Kelvin, which we'll deal with during site plan review. So I can fill in that language from them.
Okay. Is that necessary to do now, or can we do that after the resolution is either passed or voted down?
No, actually, you could just strike that paragraph. It was more for the board's information. That will be for the site plan approval. So I anticipate that letter. I've been corresponding with Scott this week, but so that could be, yes, that's correct. Scott Doyle at County Planning, who handles the 239 referrals. So you can strike that paragraph from your resolution, and I'll just put it in the planning boards
I'm good with striking that paragraph. Thank you.
if you'd like.
So as per revised, I don't think we have to go back and redo this, do we, as a
I don't
motion and
think
second?
so. I don't think
Okay.
so.
So as per revised, is there any other further discussion? If not, Mrs. Munson?
Andrew Benson,
Yes.
Doug Day,
Yes.
Bronwyn Losey,
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore,
Yes.
Edward Levine.
Yes. Okay, number 6 in your packet is a presentation on Caneyville franchise agreement renewal and franchise fee audit services by Michael Roberts of the Cohen Law Group.
And may I just make one statement relative to the last project approval is that the planning board will be considering the matter at their June 28th meeting, for which I anticipate a mailing of 600 feet to all neighboring properties. So hopefully folks will be a bit more informed about that portion of the project approval. So thanks for pointing that out, Mike.
So is Mr. Cohen in the waiting room?
Oh, I'm admitting Mike Roberts now to speak about the.
Excuse me, Mr. Roberts. So this will be
Yeah.
up to 15 minutes, Mr. Roberts, so you have the floor. Hello. Oh, I think you might have to unmute yourself.
There we go.
Maybe.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you, everyone. Sorry, I was just admitted I had was delayed in the lobby. I'd like to thank the town board for having me and for the opportunity to submit a proposal on behalf of the Cohen Law Group to assist the town of Lansing in cable franchise renewal negotiations and a cable franchise fee audit of Charter. To give a bit of background into our firm, we are a small law firm based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And in our history, we have represented exclusively municipal governments in cable, wireless, broadband, and other telecommunications matters. We have never represented the industry, nor will we ever represent the industry. And over the past 20 plus years, cable franchising has really been our firm's bread and butter. We've negotiated with nearly every cable operator, including a number of cable franchise renewal and original cable franchise agreements with Charter. Our firm was actually founded by Dan Cohen, who is a former Pittsburgh city councilman, and he founded our firm following the city of Pittsburgh's initial cable franchise renewal negotiations with Comcast and Verizon. We have represented a number of New York municipalities in negotiations with Charter. Some of those municipalities include Rochester, Great Neck, Cheektowaga, Irondequoit, Amsterdam, and a number of other smaller municipalities. And what this ultimately means is that our firm is very familiar with both the law surrounding cable franchising, as well as the negotiation techniques and tactics of Charter. And the latter is very important here because Charter's negotiation techniques have become far more aggressive in this latest round of franchise renewal negotiations. So the negotiation process here really will entail two separate lanes. One will be improving upon the town's existing cable franchise agreement, and I think we have a great opportunity to do that, and I'll detail some of those areas of improvement in a short while here. But also fighting to retain the rights and privileges that the town currently has under its existing cable franchise agreement. What we have seen in Charter's negotiations recently is that they seek to kind of strip back a number of the rights and requirements of existing cable franchise agreements to be far more in favor of the cable operator. So not only will we be seeking to improve what the town has in place, but also seeking to preserve what the town negotiated for in this last round of cable franchising. With that said, I'd like to talk just briefly about the cable franchise renewal process and the law surrounding this process before diving into our proposal and some of the areas where we think we can be of assistance to the town. Franchise renewal is really a municipality's best opportunity to assert their rights and obtain benefits from a cable operator. These agreements are of a long term. I think the town's current agreement was of a 10-year term that expired back in 2013, but has been kind of governing ever since. But renewal really allows a municipality to look at the cable operator's past performance. And this is actually what the Cable Act, which governs franchise renewal negotiations, says a municipality should do, is review a cable operator's past performance and determine the municipality's future cable-related needs. This is a great opportunity to do so, and we are proposing that the town do so via both the franchise fee audit to review Charter's past franchise fee payments and ensure that the town has received all of the compensation that it's due under the existing franchise agreement, as well as to negotiate a strong franchise renewal agreement. That renewal negotiation under Section 626 of the Cable Act can go one of two ways. There is a formal process and an informal process. The formal process is far more involved. But frankly, I would say 99.9% of cable franchise renewal negotiations are undertaken under the informal process. So the informal process is really a typical contract negotiation. We start from an initial draft. Our firm will prepare an initial draft on behalf of the town from which to start these negotiations. And then we exchange drafts with the cable operator, conduct any necessary negotiations calls, and of course, interface with the town as needed, attend any town meetings or committee meetings that our presence may be needed at to ensure that we are addressing all of the town's needs as well as negotiating the strongest possible agreement on behalf of the town. I'll tell you a bit about the formal process, noting that we likely will not dive into the formal process unless things really go awry. That process is far more formalized. What that entails is the town preparing what's known as a request for renewal proposal. That is a formal RFP that is provided to the cable operator. They then submit a formal proposal to address those needs identified in the RFRP. And there is essentially a trial process that will be governed by the town board in order to determine whether the town's cable-related needs are being met. The process is frankly very expensive, so it's something that we seek to avoid, and it's often unnecessary for cable franchise renewal negotiations, but it's something that the town should bear in mind. There are a number of changes in law and technology that we seek to address in these renewal negotiations as well. As you might imagine, as cable subscribers and technology users, since this current cable franchise agreement was negotiated back in 2003, the technology has changed quite a bit. There's been a shift towards streaming media. There has been a movement away from cable subscribing for your typical resident. And the technology being offered by the cable operator has changed. And that touches on a number of areas of the franchise agreement that are important to address that changing technology. The law has also changed in that the FCC has issued a number of orders relating to cable franchising that are very often largely in favor of cable operators. One important one is what's known as the 621 order. It relates to Section 621 of the Cable Act, and it governs how certain in-kind services are addressed via a cable franchise. So in-kind services are generally things that are offered to a municipality under the auspices of a cable franchise agreement that are not the franchise fee itself. And I'll talk more about the franchise fee here in a moment, but that franchise fee is really a 5% or up to 5% of gross revenues fee that's paid to a municipality for use of the public rights of way. That 621 order stated that any in-kind services, so free services offered to community facilities, dark fiber runs, institutional networks, certain support for educational or governmental channels can be offset against the franchise fee. And there's an increasingly complex way that that's addressed as that Section 621 order has been kind of digested and litigated in certain appeals. So that is one of the areas that we would need to address in a franchise renewal agreement. And it's important to negotiate flexible language to address those changes in law, because the FCC is a federal agency. The makeup of the FCC changes, and the regulations that are promulgated by the FCC can change really on a 4-year basis, and they are a very active agency. So we want to ensure that we're not locking the town into any unfavorable language under current FCC regulations for an agreement that could be anywhere from 10 to 15 years in term. So with that said, I would like to now dive into the actual proposal itself. I want to note that the proposal that we submitted, the full proposal that was submitted to the town, covers only franchise renewal negotiations. Following a meeting I had on June 1st with the broadband committee, it was requested that I amend our cost proposal to address a franchise fee audit as well. So you'll note that in the engagement letter that was provided, that a franchise fee audit cost is covered as well. So I'd like to touch briefly on the franchise fee audit first. As I noted, reviewing a cable operator's past performance as part of this franchise renewal process, and the big thing that municipalities really have to review is the payment of a franchise fee. The current franchise agreement imposes a 2% franchise fee on the cable operator's gross revenues, and has kind of a limited definition of gross revenues, but also kind of a vague definition of gross revenues. And it allows the town to look back on 3 years worth of franchise fee payments to determine whether Charter has been paying those franchise fees accurately. So what our firm would do in conducting a franchise fee audit of Charter would be to request comprehensive financial documentation from the cable operator relating to those 3 years of franchise fee payments. What the town receives now is typically a one-page report that says, this is the gross revenues for this past quarter. This is 2% of those gross revenues. That's what we've paid to the town. That's good for kind of reviewing that limited mathematical calculation. But what we really need to look at is whether Charter is including every single line item of service that it offers under the umbrella of cable services in the franchise fee calculation. So that covers anything from your basic, basic or expanded basic service offerings to late fees, to fees for insufficient funds, return checks, advertising revenues, home shopping revenues, a number of both subscriber and non-subscriber revenue sources that frankly often are missed by cable operators. Charter in particular had a transition phase from Time Warner to Charter, where we often uncover a number of accounting issues that result in underpayments. And ultimately what the audit will result in is a final audit report that we would prepare that details the entirety of the audit process, what we've uncovered via that process, and makes recommendations to the town. If there were underpayments to be discovered, and having done these audits for about 22 years now, we've uncovered underpayments about 60% of the time in a franchise fee audit. We would also assist the town in recovery of any of those unpaid franchise fees, as well as the imposition of any penalties or interests that are permitted under the franchise agreement. Part of that process is also reviewing what's known as a homes passed list. That is essentially a list that's maintained by the cable operator of every single residence in the town that could potentially have Charter service, and comparing that against the list maintained by the town to ensure that all Charter subscribers in the town are being properly included in that gross revenues calculation. Because what we often see is that Charter doesn't know the exact boundaries of the town. They don't know whether residences along the borders of the town are in the town or a neighboring municipality. And if they are erroneously coded to your neighbor, that means your neighbor is getting your franchise fees. So that process ensures that both retroactively, all of the franchise fees are being recovered, but also that moving forward, the town is receiving all franchise fees that it's entitled to. Moving forward to the franchise renewal negotiation, like I said, we really have, I think, some great opportunities to improve upon what the town has now. And being mindful of my time, I'm going to move through these as efficiently as possible. I see a nod, so I will do that as best possible. The big question, of course, is revenue. At the center of a franchise agreement is franchise fee revenue. It is the percentage of the cable operator's gross revenues that a municipality receives as compensation for use of the rights of way. Right off the bat, the town's currently imposing a 2% franchise fee. Federal law permits you to impose up to 5%, and we can get that 5% maximum fee. That is an immediate boost in franchise fee revenue. But beyond the percentage, of equal importance is how we define gross revenues. We're taking a 5% or 2% or anywhere in between slice of a pie, but the gross revenues definition is really determining how big that pie is. The current agreement has a very limited definition of gross revenues. It doesn't specifically enumerate any revenue sources. Our definition of gross revenues that we would seek to negotiate into the agreement has 27 revenue sources that we've identified over the years, as well as a provision that will allow the town to capture anything that doesn't fall under those 27 revenue sources, as well as any new technology that might emerge in the future. We also include requirements that would recover franchise fees or ensure the proper apportioning of franchise fees for services that would fall under both cable, internet, or telephone, and kind of span those three sources to allow to prevent Charter, excuse me, from using creative accounting to get out of their franchise fee payment obligations. A few other items of improvement that we have identified are customer service standards. The current agreement has very limited customer service standards, and the town is only able to enforce customer service standards to the extent that they are contained within the franchise agreement. Obviously, the New York PSC has customer service standards that it promulgates as well, but again, by negotiating those into the actual agreement, it gives the town more teeth to ensure that its residents are getting the best cable service possible. We also, as I mentioned, addressed that 621 order for any community facilities that would receive cable service under the agreement. What may have been free cable service in the past, but moving forward will be based on the cable operator's marginal costs, and that determination is a negotiation in and of itself. A very important area is the ability to enforce the provisions of the cable franchise agreement. Currently, the only way to enforce the town's current agreement is to revoke the cable franchise entirely and kick Charter out. As you can imagine, that's not a very effective means of enforcement, and I'm sure your residents would not find that an effective means of addressing problems with Charter, as they would then be without cable, internet, and telephone service. And then finally, another very important area that is a bit sneaky in terms of its appearance, it is what's known as competitive equity. It is language that addresses how other non-charter entities seeking a franchise or providing video service in the town affect Charter's franchise agreement. So typically this language says that if the town were to grant another cable franchise, say to Comcast, that Comcast would enter the town, seek a franchise for themselves, that any of the meaningful terms of that franchise, if they are more beneficial than the terms of the Charter agreement, say you give or impose a 5% franchise fee on Charter and a 3% franchise fee on Comcast, those terms have to be adjusted to be equal among these competitive cable providers. What Charter seeks to negotiate into the agreements now is that any entity offering any video service in the town on any basis that is able to do so on a more favorable basis will allow Charter to unilaterally utilize the same authorizations and provisions for their offering of cable service. And why that's important is that companies like Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, other streaming services that do offer video service, or even cell providers that offer certain video services over cable or over cellular data, are not required under federal law to obtain a cable franchise. So if this language is included in a franchise agreement in the way that Charter proposes it, that means that by virtue of Hulu, Netflix, and other video service providers being permitted to offer their services within the town absent a franchise agreement, Charter has legal footing to get out of any obligation of the franchise agreement that they would like to, whether that be the franchise fee, whether that be the requirement to obtain permits or restore the street rights of way, or provide service in accordance with the customer service standards of the agreement. So that is a short section of the agreement that certainly on a forward-thinking basis, as the industry moves not necessarily away from cable franchising or cable service, but into other adjacent arenas like streaming service, can be very important over the long term of a cable franchise agreement. So that is just kind of a brief overview, and I'm sure it doesn't seem so brief, but there are other areas of the franchise that can be improved upon here as well. But those are some of the big ticket items that we've identified. We've also proposed the cost of these services on a flat fee basis. Having done quite a number of franchise fee audits and cable franchise renewals over the years, we're able to offer our services on a flat fee basis. And we've also, just want to point out, offered a 10% discount on our typical flat fee if engaged for both of these projects. So with all of that said, more than happy to answer any questions that the board may have for me now.
So first question I have is that Brown and Joe, was this contract presented to the broadband committee, or is this something that we need to discuss further review? Is this I'm just shotgunning it here. Is this something as far as as far as procedure goes, I mean, have you been, have you seen this contract that, was spoken of?
Yes, this was passed around the committee, and we also talked with Mike as well. So the committee looked at the contract and approved it. Both, and the committee wanted to do both. They wanted to do the audit and the renewal agreement.
So is this something that we need to discuss and maybe pass at our July
I'm sorry, I'm
meeting?
having trouble hearing you.
Might be your software down there. I'll yell if I have to. Is this something that we'll discuss and perhaps either pass or reject at our next meeting?
I think I'm prepared to pass it at this meeting. If you want more time, we can push it off to the next meeting.
Have you sent it to the rest of the board members? Because Andre hasn't seen it either. Neither have I.
I assume it went out with the packet.
I couldn't tell you. I get so much stuff, I couldn't tell you whether it went or not.
Okay. Is this something that can wait till our July meeting so we have a chance to look at it?
Yes.
Okay. Bronwyn, do you have any more? I'll leave it to the rest of the board members if they have any questions.
I just add to what Joe said that the broadband committee was pretty enthusiastic about the contract and didn't have and wanted to recommend that it be passed. But if y'all haven't had a chance to look at it, that would be helpful in passing it, certainly.
Any other questions from board members? Initially, I'm very encouraged by this, and this is exactly what I asked Brown and Joe to actually do on that committee. So it's very encouraging. I just have to have time to look at it. You know, if we're not time sensitive, it seems as though you widened your scope as far as where you tap into all the different revenues, and from there, hopefully, you'll harvest more money for the town on this, and that's exactly what I was looking for. So thank you. It was impressive. You can condense into 15 minutes something that probably takes you 5 weeks to go through. So I appreciate this, and I'm not hopefully being disrespectful by only giving 15 minutes on it. But it looks like this is something that we're obviously looking for. So as soon as we have a chance to look at that, we'll discuss it at our next meeting. Okay.
That sounds great. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to submit the proposal. And if anything is needed from me in the interim, please feel free to reach out and I'm happy to provide it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So in our packet, item 7 is a presentation of EatSmart with Lisa Marshall.
Okay. Great. I'm not sure how I'm gonna be able to keep it back.
I've seen you in action before, Lisa. You can hold her.
Okay. So. Thanks, everybody. It's so exciting to be back at the town of Lansing, and this is my first in-person mask-free board meeting.
You want to take a moment?
So long. Oh my God, this feels so great.
I mean, just savor it just for a moment.
Yeah. it's
First piece of
beautiful.
chocolate after you lump it up.
Exactly. It's a beautiful thing. And just really thank you for putting me on the agenda so quickly after a shout. Although I will say that Zoom did allow me last month to attend 2 different town board meetings in the same thing. So I don't know if that's a plus or not. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get this show on the road here. We connect the screen, get it easier to the whole.
Up there. I mean, if I went like this, maybe it does. Let's try that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. How's the audio for those of you at home?
Can everyone hear her okay?
Kinda. It's a little wobbly in terms of the sound quality.
Yeah, it's a little tinny, but I can make out most of it.
Okay, so if I talk right into the microphone like this, is that better?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, so thanks again for having me, and most of you are familiar with Heat Smart, Tompkins County's community nonprofit that exists to promote the benefits of home energy efficiency and in particular heat pumps. I like to talk about the 3 C's: the cost savings, the comfort, and the climate solutions that these technologies can provide. And I've added the 4th C of convenience, which I'll talk about in a bit. And I always just love to show this map. Heat Smart was founded here in Tompkins County, right in Caroline, a few years ago, as the very first community nonprofit promoting home energy efficiency and heat pumps. And now we are funded by NYSERDA, New York State's Energy Research and Development Authority, which is paid for by all of us every month on our utility bill. We pay something called the Systems Benefit Charge, which funds our work. So thank you for paying my paycheck. But this good idea, starting in Tompkins County, is now spread to most of New York State. And from this map, most New Yorkers are now served by a clean heating and cooling community program, such as Heat Smart. Well, why the heck do we need a community program to promote clean energy and clean heating and cooling and energy building efficiency? That's because we find ourselves in the midst of what some are calling the climate crisis, and we have this need to figure out how we're going to dramatically cut greenhouse gas emissions from all sectors. Luckily, New York passed a pretty groundbreaking climate law last year, the CLCPA, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, that actually requires us to now make these cuts in emissions. And as you can see from this graphic, the 2 major sources of emissions are transportation and buildings. So at Heat Smart, we're really looking at that building sector and figuring out how can we cut those emissions while at the same time providing comfortable, safe, and warm and cool buildings for all New Yorkers at all income levels. So the way we cut those emissions is something called beneficial electrification. And as you can see by this chart, I wish the picture were a bit clearer, but if you electrify transportation and if you electrify heating, no matter how you're producing your electricity, you're already cutting the CO2 emissions. This is the CO2 equivalent emissions here on the y-axis. And so here's fossil heating and fossil transportation. And when you just simply electrify those, you cut emissions. But then as you green the grid, in other words, if you add more zero carbon power generation, then those get actually cleaner and cleaner. So the emissions go down and down. There's very few things that you put in today and get better over time, but this is one of them. So I was talked about heat pumps, and I've talked about them here before. The reason they are so efficient is because they are not creating heat. They are taking heat that exists in the environment, the air and the ground, putting that through a refrigeration process. It's the same process that actually keeps the inside of your refrigerator cool. So we know it works. Been relying on that for quite some time. And so those heat pumps can either take the heat out of the ground and use them to heat your house, or they can take the heat out of your house and cool your house down. So this is a couple of different kinds. The air source, this is shown a very popular model, a ductless mini split. This is the ground source heat pump or geothermal. That's kind of the gold standard. It's the most expensive to put in, but it's also the longest lasting and most efficient to run. And then this is the standalone heat pump water heater, this little guy. It's like a regular electric water heater with a little heat pump on top. And then these are just a sampling, but these are sort of the most common heat pump technologies that we see used here in Tompkins County. So just to go over why heat pumps, super duper efficient, provide heating as well as cooling, also dehumidify, which last week would have been really nice. They can also heat your hot water, improve your indoor air quality. This is both because as the heat pump runs, it's filtering and dehumidifying your air, but also because we're learning more and more that the emissions from burning those fossil fuels in your house, in your stove, et cetera, are actually impacting our air quality in pretty frightening ways. And if you heat with propane, oil, or electric heat, they will dramatically reduce your bills. And this convenience piece that I've added, we've recently been talking to a lot of Tompkins County residents who are aging in their homes, have been heating with wood, have been heating with pellets, have been heating with coal even, and are worried about being able to stay in their home as they age and not concerned about being able to continue to chop wood, to carry bags of pellets, to carry bags of coal, and the idea to have something that can provide heating and air conditioning, or even getting that window air conditioner out of the attic or out of the basement, you know, it gets harder. So be able to just have that remote control, turn on the heat, turn on the air conditioning is something very, very appealing for a lot of these folks. This is just briefly showing the cost savings. So ASHP is air source heat pump, GSHP is ground source heat pump. And as you can see, this is some data from Maine from 2017, but as compared to propane or electric baseboard heat, you're saving at least half, if not 2/3 cut on your energy bill. And I've seen even better savings than that in real life cases here in Tompkins County. One friend in Dryden, her house was heated with propane and wood, and she was spending $3,000 a year. Ground source heat pump, she spends $400 a year, and she also keeps the temperature warmer in her home than she used to. So it's a really amazing and dramatic change. I just want to really mention that right now, because of COVID, New York State has offered increased grants for building envelope improvements. That's like your insulation and your air sealing. And not only are the amount of the grants higher, but the eligibility for this program, Assisted Home Performance. People used to only get this program if they were earning up to 80% of median. Now it's 120% of median. That's about 7 out of 10 Tompkins County residents now can get grants through one of these two programs. So it's really an amazing opportunity right now for Lansing residents to get this work done. And if they are in this income category here, the Empower, they get a $10,000 grant. So, and that's these amounts and eligibilities are going to be good through November. They were supposed to only be good through last December, and they keep extending it for us. So we're really excited to let people know about that. I'm not going to go into this slide, but just there are rebates available from NYSEG for all the different kinds of heat pumps that I mentioned, as well as federal tax credits for those who owe taxes. And right now, New York State is doing a low to moderate income heat pump study. So this is for people who are not on gas, whose heating system is more than 5 years old, can get really huge grants for either air source or ground source heat pumps, and in some cases, a completely free heat pump system. This is an example of a gentleman down in Chemung County, where I live, who got the Empower grant, plus some more money through Empower, almost $13,000, plus a over $21,000 air source heat pump system completely for free through both, by combining the Empower grant with the heat pump study that's happening. And we've seen these going in, not to toot my own horn, but Heat Smart has actually helped more people get these grant monies than any other part of the state. So that brings me to why I'm here today. So the Clean Energy Communities 2.0, the leadership round, which you might have heard about from Terry Carroll, has a very, in my opinion, overwhelming menu of things that the town could do to become a clean energy community. I'm going to make it easy for you and just focus on the one that I want to help you do, which is the community campaign for clean heating and cooling. This is one of the 4 community campaign action items. The community campaigns, if you're one of the first 100 to complete them, you get a $5,000 grant. And no matter what, you're going to get 200 points towards that leadership round for the clean energy communities. And a successful campaign is only 10 Lansing residents have to get either insulation, air sealing, or heat pumps. And just to give you an example, we've already had 25 people from Lansing enroll in Heat Smart this year, and we usually see 30 to 40% conversion rate between enrollment and people who actually get the work done. And if you start a campaign now, the people who are already in our system can also count towards your goal of 10 participants. And even just a heat pump water heater counts as a home that is now, has done an improvement. So it's just a really good time to do this and get the word out. And I'm going to, I'm excited to work with you and do a lot of the work for you. So here's some of the outreach efforts that the town would have to do in order to do the campaign. This is just some of our ideas. I've been working with Caroline, Enfield, Dryden, Danby, Town of Ithaca, Newfield, and Ulysses so far. And they've all put on hosted a webinar. They put information up on their website. If they have social media, they put it on their social media. If they have a town newsletter, they put it in the newsletter. It's also an opportunity to host the Powerhouse, which is, and if you haven't seen it, it's this cute little tiny house that has solar panels and a heat pump and all this informational stuff. So it's a fun thing to bring out to a farmer's market or a festival and let the kids climb around on it and talk to the parents about heat pumps and energy efficiency. That's through the Get Your Brain Back Tompkins. You'll want to issue a press release and then put it out in any community partner calendars, whether it's the library or whatnot. Love you to display some Heat Smart yard signs, especially since I have ones that say Lansing on them and I want them out of my garage. And anything you mail out to residents, you could put a little line on, whether it's a water bill or a tax bill or whatnot. So, and then what I will do is help you to fill out the scoping document to submit to NYSERDA. I'll track the leads. I'll provide you with promotional materials and language. So you don't have to figure out what to say in your website or your newsletter. I can give you a draft that you can change or use as needed. I'll present at the webinar. I'll help promote the webinar. And most of all, I'll try to make the process fun and easy for the town to do. So that's my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions. Hope I did okay on time.
You're outstanding.
When can you start?
I'm here now. I didn't bring the yard signs, so I thought about it, then I thought maybe that's too much.
No, it's not. Drop them off anytime.
Okay.
I think it sounds fabulous. I really do. We built a house and we have geothermal heating.
Oh, that's
It's
great.
just fabulous. Fabulous. So I'm all in.
Any questions for Lisa?
Does this count for new construction as well?
Yes.
Just so we know, a lot of the new construction and the air sealing is already by code being taken care of.
Yeah, I don't know if it would count for the air sealing and the insulation on a new construction, but definitely a heat pump would count. I'll have to check on that. That's a good question.
No, it wasn't really a question. I know it. But the other couple concerns I have, Lisa, are what about our grid? I mean, I see we're going to, all electric, and then obviously electric cars are coming in, and I've actually heard of projects, and actually today, where we've got car chargers of 100 amps a piece. Now this is an extravagant house, mind you. But, we're taking, instead of a 200 amp service into a house now, we're putting 400 and 600 amp services in a house. Our houses for car chargers and obviously other electric items. And my concern with all this, and believe me, I'm in the trade, and we use these a lot. And my concern is the grid. What what improvements has NICEAG or what's the one in Syracuse? Anyway, it doesn't matter. What are they doing for bolstering the grid? We're building a house right now in Onondaga County, and there's not 2 days that go by that I don't walk by the new oven that's in with a clock on it that's blinking because we went out of power. But we actually put heat pumps in the house, and they work great. I mean, I'm not worried about that. I understand that. But that's my biggest concern with it. With the fast track to going to electric. Another point I might make, are we talking conventional heat pumps or are we talking hyper splits? In many cases, and I've been seeing this too, where we're going with conventional heads and ductless splits, them having trouble keeping up in 0 degree or below weather. That's been a concern, and we've had to address that. And the last one was back to a heat pump water heater. We actually had a building we did a couple of years ago with apartments on the first floor, a louvered door where this water heater sat, and a ductless split with a thermostat under it 15 feet away. And you walk in the door and the water heater's working, blowing off cold air through a louvered door, and then somewhat giving it cold breeze as you walk in the door 15 feet away from a thermostat where the heat pump is. So, I mean, these are all, I think they can be addressed. I'm not trying to downplay the system. I actually enjoy the system. But these are concerns that, as a builder, I have. And once again, like I say, we use them all the time. We're putting them in now locally in several different spots we're using. We're actually putting some ground source in and a job we're doing as well. So I just was wondering what are we doing to address these other issues that could face us in a short time.
Thanks, Doug, for all those questions. So when it comes to grid, there's 2 different issues, right? There's the amount of power generation needed, and then there's the system of distribution. And currently, we're projected to have more than enough power generation to electrify buildings at a much faster rate than we're doing for quite some time out. And the New York Independent System Operator and New York State are working on, planning to make sure that by the time more transportation and homes are electrified, that there's going to be all the power generation that is needed. So I'm not so worried about the generation.
I'm not worried about the generation as much as I am the grid itself. What can carry that?
That piece is super important, and I just want to remind everybody that there are very few kinds of heating that I can think of, except for a wood stove, that operate without electric power. So, it is not unique to heat pumps to need electricity to heat your home.
No, they don't require a lot of electricity.
Well, they require the power to be on. Is my
Right.
point. Right. So, if you're mean your clock is playing because the power went out, that would mean that your gas furnace wouldn't run either. But I'm not going to mince words. We know that the NICEAG electric distribution system sucks, and they have not done enough to invest to improve it. And that is something that we all workers in NICEAG great territory need a new spot. Heat Smart is spot specifically gone mano a mano with NICEAG through the rate case around this and trying to get them to invest more in the kind of infrastructure improvements that New Yorkers need now, much less with heat pumps. So it's all ongoing work. I feel very positive about that. I think that's something that our grids and infrastructure funds will be spent on. I think the IBEW is lobbying hard to get to do that work. So I feel like although NICEAG is a very tough nut to crack, we definitely have the most difficult and recalcitrant utility in New York State, in our region. I feel positive that there's going to be the right investments are going to be made by NYSEG and our chief going forward. So it's something we have to attend to it, we have to demand it, and we have to ask for it. But I think that is going to happen both through rate cases and through the Public Service Commission, and there's going to be all kinds of lobbying around getting that done. And then in the short term, heat pumps actually help the grid because they are going to even out the demand. And the more we can get ground source in, the more that helps even more. With the air source, the demand is a little higher. So we are hoping to find ways, maybe not here, for example, in Lansing, but like say in an urban area like downtown Elmira or downtown Ithaca, where we would have networked geothermal systems, that would provide heat load sharing among many different kinds of buildings. Say, had an apartment building, an ice rink, commercial buildings, et cetera. So we're going to be looking at highly efficient networked geothermal systems, in more densely populated areas. But for here, and sticking to Lansing, I think we're still going to be just seeing one house by house and hoping.
Actually, business by business too. We're using them in all sorts of businesses now too.
And then Doug, your last question about the water heaters, I actually have heard about that construction project. We would at Heat Smart never recommend putting a heat pump water heater behind a river door. We don't recommend putting them in the living space because they're taking the heat energy out of the air as they run. They really are best off in the semi-conditioned basement, and there aren't currently any really good heat pump water heating options for example, mobile homes because of that factor. So it's definitely something we're aware of, the industry is aware of, and it's something that's being worked on. They are not a one-size-fits-all type of technology, but for the right home, they are just a tremendously efficient and
No, I don't disagree with the efficiency of them at all. It just was odd that it was a cold air blowing into a warm air 15 feet away from a thermostat fighting each other. So that was my point.
hopefully.
The other thing was the ductless splits versus, the standard ductless splits versus the hyper splits.
Oh, right.
What's the cost difference?
Well, because the cold climate ductless mini splits are eligible for the rebates, that whole idea is that it comes down to being close in price, so that really we're hopefully pricing out the sort of what you call the standard ones, which are mostly just put in for air conditioning, right? They're not really meant as whole home heating systems, at least not in this climate. So that's why the New York State Clean Heat Program offers those incentives for the cold climate heat pumps only, and that's through the Heat Smart program, the contractors we recommend only put those in. So I think it's definitely an issue. I haven't seen it that much around here, but you're a builder, not me, so I haven't seen a lot of people in this area putting in that.
I haven't either.
But I think state that's a real problem because people just call up and say, I want air conditioning, and they put in a mini split, and it turns out that for about the same money with a rebate or just a little more, they could have had a whole building, whole home heating and cooling system, and for about the same price they paid for just cooling, and that's a shame. We're trying to turn that around. I mean, not me by myself, but me and a few friends.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
Forgive me for prolonging this, but I had
these are very important questions. I'm glad you're asking.
Are there any other questions for Lisa?
Looks like Raman is.
Raman?
I do. I noticed in your presentation it said something about whether you own or rent, and I'm wondering how it would work for residents who are renting their home, and like how that works for renters.
Yeah, so I won't go into detail, but basically the tenant has to be income qualified. And then depending on the income of the homeowner or the landlord, the landlord may or may not have to pay something towards those upgrades. And then I think that the tenant has to be responsible for the utility bill, but then I heard that they changed that. I'm not as familiar with the renter landlord arrangements as I should be. I keep trying to ask for clarification and not completely getting it. So I know that it's possible, and it's much rarer, of course, because you have to have basically two parties motivated to do the upgrade on the same building with the owner and the renter. But we have seen some of those projects get approved, which is exciting, but it's definitely a more complicated scenario. And for to win those grants, I do know for sure that the tenant has to be income qualified. And by the way, for Empower, I showed you the rate chart, but any family member or any household member who gets SNAP, supplemental income assistance, or if the household has had a heat award letter, that automatically qualifies you for Empower.
Thanks.
Anyone else? These slides are available again, right? Besides those units again.
Yeah.
You can send those slides to us, we email.
Yes, absolutely. I think I already did, but I'm happy to resend them. And I did send a sample resolution. You don't have to pass a resolution, but if you pass one, it's a nice thing for nicer to fee. You can also just decide to agree to do a clean heat program, and you can do that tonight or a future date, but community campaign rather. But passing a resolution is a nice gesture to show nicer that you deliberated about it, thought about it. And then, the next steps would be whoever wants to work with me, we would get that scoping document filled out, get a little team of people. Maybe there's community partners in Lansing that would want to be part of it, like, maybe the library or other entities, and then we would fill all that out. Maybe the Lansing Concerned Citizens, that energy group. Anybody who would want to sort of help promote the campaign, and then get that scoping document in and put some dates on the calendar for events and move it forward.
So that's something we can discuss at our the line meeting as part of the resolution. The art part though is very interesting. I was self design into this, but let's take it to the next level. So if I'm just listening tonight for the first time, and I'm interested in this whole program, there are contact numbers I can call, or that we would walk us through these type of things. I mean, let's say we see the harvest. Somebody who doesn't know what a heat pump is, right?
Yes. So there's three sort of pathways. There's our website, which has a lot of information and just a way to sign up. There's an app on our website where you can book a calendar appointment, but I'll call you. And then we also have a 607-500 HEAT heat number, which people can just call me. It's better to make an appointment because then, the call goes to voicemail and I have to listen to voicemail and call you back. But yes, there's people calling me all the time, making appointments, and I'm also partnering with Emily Bell at Get Your Green Back. So in all these community campaigns, so if people just want a home energy audit, I usually give those leads to her, and she follows up with them individually to schedule that audit. I just thought it would be good for us to work together, and she's the one who has the powerhouse, which is really fun. So I've been including her on all the webinars, etc. But yes, we provide, both Emily and I provide hand-holding as much or little as anybody wants. Sometimes people need to talk to me every week. Sometimes they need to talk to me only once. Sometimes they never need to talk to me, and they just sign up and they work with the installer, and next thing you know, hey, they got their heat pumps. So it just depends on the needs of the individual.
So this is information that we may put on the website.
Yes.
So that you have a little Heat Smart packet and scroll down to and maybe that's where they get information also to start the conversation, go for them, reach out to you and one way or the other.
Yeah.
The other thing is that because we're a full impact community, but there are any advantages to Lansing residents and folks, other residents outside of the Lansing area. Because I know we are municipality done?
Yes, not currently, not since the new incentives started April 1st of last year. Everything's the same in all nice like territory. So that's unfortunately there's nothing special for Lansing anymore. But we increased the benefits for everybody, especially this COVID benefit that it was part of the economic stimulus package passed last summer. So, that grant amount for Empower went to 10,000 and the eligibility for decision performance went to 120% median, and the grant amount went from 4,000 to 5,000 for that one. So, we found that people have been very responsive to those opportunities, and those are really, like, when you think about affordability, as you guys know, probably our lowest income residents tend to be paying the most for their heating services, which is really not how it should be. So getting the energy efficiency upgrades, even without a heat pump, is already lowering people's bills, making them more comfortable at home. It's just really a win-win for everybody.
So maybe we can form a heat smart committee. With our things to maybe help you.
Yeah.
Vice versa. If people are interested, they should probably contact you directly.
Yeah, I mean, we should follow up after this meeting, and if you guys aren't prepared to vote on this tonight and want to wait till July, that's fine. I will, no pressure at all on your timeline, but just remember this. Only the first 100 get the $5,000 grant. I'm just gonna say that.
we understand that. Remember the long game here, which is how we get people signed up as possible.
Yeah.
As far as that goes, and to get the proper information out there to start the conversation going. So many people that had a perhaps a preconceived attitude towards things and see, well, maybe this isn't so bad. And so we'll try to invite and we'll encourage and empower.
That sounds terrific, Ed. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for spending the time and listening to my spiel. I'll look forward to next steps with the town. Thanks.
It's always good to see you. Thank you. Okay. Item 8 in the packet is going to the floor. Do we have anybody here in town hall that would like to go to the floor? CJ, do you have anybody in the waiting room?
No one in the waiting room.
Okay, let's move on then. Next comes item 9 in your packet, which is the Lansing Community Library Report. And do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, things are getting back to normal, quote unquote, and everybody's pretty excited.
It is exciting, isn't it, when you see people come back and for a while it looked like an A&W out there to come out there with the order. Every year they go back, it was amazing. But to their credit, they made some great adjustments. So.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on then. Item 10, Lansing Youth Service Report.
This is also going quite strong. It's wonderful. This Saturday morning is the annual fishing week, which they did not have this year. So this is kind of exciting. And even if the kids don't catch anything, just learning how to fish is fun. If they do, then they teach them how to fillet and they teach them how to cook it right there.
Excellent. Okay. Item 11 is the Tompkins County Legislative Report. Mike Sigler. Hi, Mike.
Just want to say, Andrew, that I think not catching fish is learning fish. Learn to deal with disappointment.
Do they teach them how to exaggerate?
Hello, thank you for having me again. I want to thank the county's communications director, Dr. Recchio, in advance because, like Marshall Lynch before him, I draw liberally from this report. So I'm going to start with just a little wrap up of the news. There's a lot of stuff that's going on. I am sad to report that Baker's Chicken will not be at the state fair. No, Yes, I know. After 72 years, they decided not to do it, as a bunch of other ones too. Haddock's Paddock, which has been every 27 years. Gene Ellis Sausage and Dinosaur Barbecue are also. But that doesn't mean they'll go to the state fair. I'm just saying, because you're expecting to get that chicken, not getting it there, but right up the road here. Lansing, there you go.
Usually every Saturday and sometimes Fridays and Thursdays.
It does seem that way, right? I'm going to start with sad news because that way I get the sadness of the way. Try to make my ending a little better. A lot of deaths, actually, to report. I'm going to start with Tetlow Park. She passed away. I've known Tetlow, 20 years. Lansing resident, Roy Park, husband. Very big into philanthropy. Worked for Park Outdoor Advertising, but also the Triad Foundation, which has given Lansing money, which has given really everybody money at some point, it seems. So she passed away. Kind of a surprise there. She had battled cancer, not that had anything to do with her death, but really was a fighter when it came to this. Just a surprising loss, and frankly, a devastating loss. Tom Todd passed away. Former county legislator, was there before I was, also Dryden town supervisor.
Yes,
Dryden town supervisor.
when I lived in Dryden,
Man with many hats. Also chickens. So
he was a farmer.
there you go, chicken farmer. And he had moved with Elsie down to New Jersey to set up with assisted living. He passed away. So you can look that obituary up online as well. I just wanted to say, I don't know anybody that has a bad thing to say about Tom Todd. And usually politicians pick up something along the way, and he just never did. I do remember when he drove into the ditch by my road, which is now 12 feet deep, and no one at the state seems to recognize that. But he did survive that along with Elsie. And again, a long life, in his 90s, and had lived it. I think it was Phyllis. Really was just a heck of a man. Tom Hatfield passed away as well. Dave Hatfield, we all know him, his brother, I think you probably all know Tom Hatfield too. I just came from his calling hours. And also the other Hatfield, farmer, right in Lansing as well. So, we have a long history with the Hatfields in this town, and he will be 65 years old and young. So I love to hunt, love his daughters and his family. And the Hatfields really have given a lot to this town. That moves me off of that, and now I will also go to another loss, but thankfully Matthew is still with us. Matthew Montag has left the Tompkins Weekly, and I wanted to say thank you, Matt, for reporting on our town. He did a great job of it. His mother before him did that job as well. We apparently have picked up somebody great though, Audrey Warner. She's got a great story in the paper today about Peter Wheeler. He's being commemorated at Ludlowville. Sorry, you seem late. So
No,
that'll be on Saturday, I think like 10:30. Commemorative plaque down there, so that's exciting. Basically to celebrate Juneteenth, which is this month. That's also in my county report. We recognize Juneteenth, which was when the last slaves apparently in America were finally notified that they were no longer slaves, and that came 2 years after the actual freeing of the slaves in America, posed to become a national holiday. So we will see if everybody gets another day off to celebrate that sea change, frankly, in America. What else? Let's get into the regular report. Obviously, the big news is the lifting of the most remaining mandates at the state level that happened this week. We are still waiting on the guidance from the Centers of Disease Control on K-12 masking in schools, but at least the kids don't have to wear those anymore outside. And the social distancing of 6 feet, that has been lifted. Allowing businesses to function normally, just with Crossroads. It looks much more normal than it had before. So head on up, have a beer, have some to eat. Things are certainly back to normal now. A little concerning for me, I hope for everyone, is the governor has maintained his emergency powers, despite the lack of apparent emergency. But he still retains those. I'm hoping the legislature will come back and reclaim that role. I asked for that 3 months ago. I'm going to continue asking for that because I believe the best government is one that runs like a normal government. And that's where your legislature
you folks of the legislature of the town, I think that it's good for you to have a say in what goes on. So the county legislature will be returning to in-person meetings in July. So we're all very excited about that. And obviously the distancing is now out the window, so it makes it a lot easier for us to do that. Last night's meeting, interim Tompkins County Administrator Lisa Holmes, she presented an overview of the $19.8 million of one-time American Rescue Plan funds that have been made available to the county. So she gave us the key dates, restrictions on the use of the funds, some of the options that we are looking at for the capital program when it comes to that money. You can find that on my legislator Facebook page. There's a survey monkey. You can go on and say, hey, we think the money should be spent on this. Gives you a lot of information there. And then you can always go to the county website too, and there's a lot of information there. We can pay down debt, and then that would free up other money for us to spend. So literally make your voice heard. It's a lot of money, 19.8 million. And we want to know what you think we should do. Michael Stitley, I'm happy to say, was confirmed as the next director of the Department of Emergency Response. This was a while coming. We're very happy to have Michael come aboard. He most recently has been the emergency preparedness coordinator and interim security manager for Guthrie Health Systems. So again, this is one of our offices that at the county that is in Lansing, up at the airport, and we run on the show up there for emergency response. We passed a resolution approving 2 positions, the staff and community justice center, and implement the reimagining safety plan that happened last night. So that's close to $200 million or $200,000. We're going to split the cost with the city. Earlier this month, a resolution calling for moratorium on the operation of cryptocurrency mining centers until the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation can review the environmental impacts. That passed unanimously. I mean, this is going to be a state thing. Anna Kellis, our assemblywoman, is really at the forefront of this, asking for the state to kind of look at cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is an energy hog in that field. There are other cryptocurrencies that don't use quite the energy that they do. I've been following Bitcoin for a long time, 2014. Some people call it not real money. It actually is real money. It's just a different kind of money. And I think we have to decide whether or not that's something the state should do going forward, or at least take a look at the energy use, because it really is quite high. A resolution member filed by Dan Klein. He wanted to leave the forests that we own alone in Tompkins County. Other people want us to manage them. I don't have a strong opinion of this either way, to be honest, but Dan really has a passion for this, and I think that should be noticed. When someone is so involved in something and this has become their kind of boudoir, I think it's a good idea to let them kind of take the ball and run. No one is going to watch these fires better than Dan. And I said that in the meeting, and I believe that. I think that he is a good person to keep an eye on this. We also recognize, as have you, that it is LGBTQI plus Pride Month, and it is also Dairy Month. So we recognize that. Dairy Princess, I think she knows somebody here on the board. So got a picture of her today, Super Saturday, which was kind of fun. So we also commemorated, as I mentioned, Juneteenth, and we'll be able to do that right here in Lansing again for African American liberation from slavery. And that should be a great event down below. I thank the town for hosting that. I think it would be interesting. That is it for me, for now.
Excellent. Does anybody have any questions for Mike?
You can name the Dairy Princess, it's okay.
Well, I'm going to let you take it over.
Well, yeah, my granddaughter Zora Benson,
Yes.
and her twin Amber Benson.
Everybody, the whole Benson family.
Yes, it's so funny to see my name there. What?
I think it was just a campaign. If you were campaigning, that would be perfect.
Well,
No, I did find it interesting they were giving away Vermont's cheddar though. So I think,
well, that's what they.
yes. Oh no, I wasn't blaming the Benson family.
And there was a big dairy parade and drive.
There was. Yes, I can't go there. Yes, the dairy parade, all the cows are up driving as well. Where our cows are bad. I don't want to get into a turf war driving.
Anything else you two want to talk about? We'll come back in 10 minutes and we'll finish this up. Okay, all good? Anybody else?
Oh, I have one other thing.
Oh, please.
I'm sorry, the Doug Road Bridge. I went down, I met with some of the property owners down there on the Doug Road Bridge. I wanted to tell the town, so there are obviously two ways that can get paid for it. This Bridge New York, which gives you a lot of flexibility on the kind of bridge you want. I still think the county's gonna pick up that 5% if the Bridge New York goes through. If that doesn't go through and the county has to pick up the entire bill, I did talk to Jeff about that. Jeff said he's not inclined to build a two-lane bridge. That is not set in stone, if the county has to do that. He said he's actually more inclined to build a one-lane bridge at that site. It just has to bear the weight. That's literally the whole deal. It's got to bear the weight of a fire truck, of a garbage. It's got to do that. But he is completely open to a one-lane bridge. The difference between that and the Freeze Road Bridge, if anybody asks you, is they'll say, well, why is this different? The Freeze Road Bridge is about 2,000 cars a day, I believe. And poised to take more traffic because they're building on the barn. Whereas the Doug Road Bridge sees fewer than 400. I mean, much fewer than 400 is apparently a number that the state has. Doug Road obviously much fewer than 400, and it's never going to grow beyond. Unless you know something I know, it's going to stay about 15 houses there. So just wanted to put some people's mind to rest. That's where we are. It's not like we're pushing some giant bridge down there.
No, I mean, we had feedback from the residents.
Okay. No, and I told them that you got to do that. You got to look out for your neighborhood. And I'm glad people did come out and did that. And I went down and I talked with some folks. I talked to Larry and I talked to the rest of the neighbors down there. So.
Yeah, Larry Beck, I think you're making reference to, right? We also bumped into each other and he expressed the one-lane bridge on that. But we'll guess we'll wait and see, right? I mean,
I'm hoping you guys get the bridge money. It's just a lot of money.
Well, in the end, since it's the county's bridge, the county's the one that decides what the design has to be. And I think we're all rooting for a one-lane bridge because it's silly to put a huge bridge for 6 houses. But let's see whether we get the Bridge New York money and then we can start seeing what we can design with it.
Yep. Sounds good, Joe.
okay, anything else for Mike? Okay, thanks.
Hey, no problem.
Oh, please. Please, would you?
A lot more leases have come through the solar panels, so just so you know. So a lot more property now. It's crossed over Auburn Road over to the west side now, so just give me a heads up.
I'm sorry, leases for farmland?
Leases for farmland for next era is that one, and then CS Tower, I think is the one that's further over in Groton. But so it's CJ knows much more, I think. But I've been following next era just because that's the one that impacts Lansing more than the other one. But yeah, it's crossed over to Auburn Road now and it's kind of shooting down Buck. I'll put together a cool little map. I have a core cutting out construction paper as we speak. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Are you sure? Are you sure? I mean,
I think so.
Okay.
I should.
You want to give you a moment here just in case something pops up?
It's not like that doesn't happen. So.
Well, it's enjoyable. This unmasking thing is just.
Right. When are you guys going to be full here?
That's a good question.
Well, as of the June 24th, it's still in. It's been the open meetings law has been suspended. We'll see where it goes.
Yep.
And we'll see if the governor pushes it again until July, August, September. We don't know. All right. Stay tuned.
Cool. All right. I'll see you.
You bet. Okay, Park and Recreation, Pat Terrell's report is here. Is Pat in this?
No.
Okay.
Do I look like that?
I don't think so.
I got a lot more hair.
I think we can read it.
Yes. So let's move on to number 13. One of the highlights of our evening is the Highway Department report. And here's Mike Mosley. It's in our packet. Do we have any questions for Mike? Do you want to make any comments, Mike? We're going to try to get you out of here because 5 o'clock comes pretty early. Okay. Things look going along very well. Looks like with district number 5, amongst other things. And you have excellent mulch. You guys make excellent mulch. I'm just saying, it is super.
Did you get some?
I'm doing the mulching at the church. So go by, and just ooh and ah as you go by. It just radiates.
Notice no one stops, Ed. No one stops.
Put in tubs for my car. A lot of tubs, a lot of driving. That's okay. Any other comments for Mike?
For the mulch, do you have to make an appointment to go get it?
No.
You just go.
Anytime. It's always a.
Thank you.
There's wonderful conversations at the mulch. I'm just saying, you go there and you start talking to people, and it is like a cafe shop, really. It is.
You bring your coffee?
You can, I mean, we help each other with the mulch, we put the mulch in the basket, I mean, life is good, it's a kumbaya moment, you know what I'm saying, over mulch. It's great. And it's homemade.
Should get a food truck there.
It's
Yeah,
organic, it's
yeah.
homemade, these guys, you feel the love. It's amazing how much heat comes off those piles though, it is amazing. And if you ever had a chance to watch these guys do it, I say guys because we don't have any female employees, but they're just as welcome as the guys are. Last I saw Jamie Spencer, I thought he was going straight up with the bulldozer. He's pushing the pile. It's amazing how they go all the way up. Once they push the pile, they grind it, they push it up. It's just amazing thing what they do with this thing. And that mulcher can do a tree about what, 2 feet in diameter?
Down to 8 inches. I mean, it's a little bit different than a tub grinder.
Yeah.
You know, it's horizontal.
Mike, if we came with a small farm truck, would you load it?
Yeah. If someone's around, usually Bob Bogarts is around, you know, if no one else is, as our guys are out and about.
Because I couldn't do it with a shovel.
Between 6 a.m. and 4, we'll load it up there.
Thank you.
And the new employees are doing well?
Yes, very well. Dan is working right along with Bogey every single day, working on truck brakes right now. Eric is helping with the roadside mowing, trying to catch up. It is way ahead of us. I talked with Nick Ensign from the county, he's struggling the same as we are. Between the rain and the heat, it's a struggle for us to keep up.
Yeah, it's almost like August weather.
So
But-
it nicely, yes.
Yeah, but you got 2 mowers, you got 2 people that know how to run it. Where we go, good. Okay, thank you. Okay, CJ, Director of Planning. You also have a new employee, don't you? My goodness, we're hiring them left and right here.
Hey, everybody. Sorry, I didn't quite get to written report this month, but the short of the long is there's oodles of project review. Any of you familiar with the latest planning board agendas are familiar with that. So that's obviously taking up a lot of time lately, but to positive ends, I think we're getting a lot of great feedback. Also want to give a shout out to Highway and Fire, who have been really helpful in making sure that we get a lot of helpful feedback on project review. So big thanks to them. And to that effect, to help pay it forward a little bit, we are coordinating the Doug Roach Bridge, New York application, as Joe just mentioned. We just received confirmation from the state that the application was the complete application was received. And we'll be sure to keep coordinating with the Ithaca Tompkins County Transportation Council, as well as County Highway, on making sure that we do receive that reimbursements, and we'll try to work out the workflows of how we do that without necessarily running into some financing issue later on. We're also working last month on the pre-application to the Appalachian Regional Commission for improvements to Myers Park. Again, a big shout out to Parks and Recreation for assisting us with a really cool video they put together, highlighting the aspects of the park that will be applying for upgrades for, both through the ARC application process. Hopefully, we're going to find out whether they've selected us to apply for that, but certainly through the consolidated funding application again this year. The parks, and also just as a kind of public service announcement while I have everybody here, if you haven't received it already, next Tuesday, June 22nd at 6 p.m., Parks and Recreation, along with the consultants for the Parks, Recreation, and Trails Master Plan, will be holding a virtual public meeting, number 2, to review the concept plans, which are really cool. And we invite you to register and participate in that. The first session was incredible, and I think we got really, really great feedback, and that's been circulated pretty widely. So hopefully we have good attendance there as well. Lastly, the next 2 months are really going to be focused on onboarding new employees. We have Scott Russell started this week, and Lynn's last day was yesterday. Sad to report, but he is in full retirement and with glorious weather to boot, so good for him. And Scott is now on board, so please stop by and say hello. And our new planner, John Zepko, will be starting on Monday, June 28th. So please feel free to stop by and say hello to him. I've asked him to attend planning board that evening as well, so he can meet the whole crew. But again, these coming months, onboarding new employees as well as the consolidated funding application. We're going to be putting in 3 applications this year, some of which are already partially complete. One of them is the long-standing wish from the Highway Department for a vacuum truck. This will be very, very helpful to them for water, sewer, and stormwater issues throughout the town. So that is very high on their list, wish list, and it's a very pricey piece of equipment, runs in the range of $430,000, for which the town would only have to pay 25%. So this is a wonderful opportunity, especially in light of the new Cayuga Lake TMDL document. So Brown and I were talking about that today with county planning. That's a total maximum daily load, but focused on phosphorus. And we also have the HABS action plan. And I really wanted to reiterate that the Highway Department are stewards of water quality in the town, and anything we can do to support them. Certainly we are focusing on. And to that end, our second water quality improvement program application this year will be for the Salmon Creek stream bank stabilization. Just this morning, I met with Highway, Tompkins County Soil and Water, as well as consultants Barton and LaJudas on getting that property fixed up, thanks to the Benson family, who is allowing the town to be able to enter the property and do some work there to really help the stream bank stabilization project. So fingers crossed on both of those applications. Last but not least, of course, would be the Myers Park Redux application. I think we have a very good chance this year, and especially with the re-envisioning of Myers Park, which I believe Parks Director is very enthusiastic about. So please come and see more about it next Tuesday. The consultants have done some really incredible work and put a lot of great thought into it. And the committee as well, very engaged members, and I can't say enough good things about that process. It's been a really good time. And they'll be helping us fill in the finances for that application. So a lot to come at the July meeting, a bunch of resolutions, a bunch of information on financing and costs of these projects. Obviously, we're hoping to do much of it in kind, but stay tuned. July will be busy with wrapping up grant applications. So yeah, without further ado, if there's any questions, happy to answer.
Any questions from the board members? No, excellent job, CJ, as normal. I'm glad you're going to be up to full speed here soon. And you couldn't ask for a better opportunity with all these pots of money floating around out there to have us take as many as we can. So thank you. Okay. Item 15. Which is the engineer's report. I lost my code here. Move on to item 16, which is the ag report. We'll now move on to item 17, the consent agenda. Mrs. Munson, you want to walk me through this? You have the helm.
Okay, so first of all, well, we typically, someone reads the titles and then we do a motion in a second and vote at the end. But two of the resolutions that are in here you spoke about tonight that you may not want to do tonight. So I don't know if you want to take those out before we start and just say they're eliminated, or what you want to do about that. So
Which ones?
one is, I'll find the letters for you. Let's see.
One is agreeing to the cable franchise audit and negotiation contract.
Which letters, please?
That's
So-
H.
That's H.
And then K, I think, is the other one.
So I don't know if you want them in or out. They can, I mean, if you don't want to vote on them tonight, then they can come out.
I don't think they're that time sensitive.
It doesn't matter, doesn't make any
Quite frankly,
difference
I
to me.
haven't. Have you seen them? I mean, I haven't seen them, so.
Seen,
The consent agenda resolution, so I'm a little bit uncomfortable with this. I would like to take H and K out until next.
Okay, it's fine with me.
Or,
Was that an oversight on my part by any chance? I mean, I put in the resolution, and I thought I sent the letter too, but sorry
I
about that.
Stuff was sent out. I couldn't swear to it without looking at what I actually sent, but-
if we can find the information on we take a 10-minute break and look at these. I don't know, Doug, did you have a chance to look at these resolution?
No,
So I guess that's the case that we'll postpone those two.
No.
we have to take out K. I think we just approve it.
Well, we talked about the H, right?
H is the
What we just had.
The,
a conversation.
table.
The H is a cable. K,
So we were gonna table that anyway, right?
Right. That's why I was saying, if you're going to table it, I'll just take it out and just table it until, I'll take it out of the consent agenda and we'll put it in for next month. And the other one was K, is the community campaign, which Ed had mentioned maybe waiting until July for that. So I was just asking for clarification of if we should do that tonight or not.
It's self-explanatory, I mean, at least to me.
I don't want to push anybody else, but I'm reading it right now. It looks like it's pretty well straightforward. K
I'd
is.
rather do K tonight.
I'm comfortable with K. Is, Doug, you want to read it briefly?
I have no problem with it. I have no problem with that.
All right, then let's just walk back a little bit to H.
I mean, have we seen any,
You have H in front of you too. If you just want to quickly read it, if you feel comfortable moving forward, we will. If not,
no, I mean, but what are the costs of this?
it's
It's about $12,000.
it says here that detailed knowledge of franchise renewal agreement process to be compensated at a total flat fee not to exceed $12,960. $12,960.
And the broadband committee is in favor of it, I take.
Right.
Enthusiastically, I might add.
I think we should approve it.
I've got no problem with it.
I'm comfortable with that. So let's keep it.
Okay, so leave that one.
You're
in.
you're
Okay.
feeling comfortable with it? I want everyone to feel comfortable with it before we move
Well, no,
forward.
it just, it just was a,
Well, I want to be cooperative, Joe, consider I pounded on you for 3 meetings to get this thing done. So at least I can.
Well, if it helps, not my camera's just only broadcasting a picture, but if it helps, not only was I one of the people that referred the Cohen Group to the town because of their expertise, but at the request of CJ and indirectly through CJ, the broadband committee, I reviewed this as compared to other types of agreements of this nature, its terms of its scope and its price and its terms, and I had no proposed changes to it. So from a legal perspective, the contract is fine and the price is actually quite competitive given the amount of work that's involved in that project and the amount of expertise that's involved in that particular unique field of law. So if that helps provide comfort, I'll throw that out there for you.
I have no problem with it. Let's leave it in.
I Apologies for taking a step back, but I just want to make sure all the board members, including myself, are comfortable. Looks like we have. So I better take one step back and then move 4 steps forward. So I think we're in a good spot. All right, Mrs. Munson.
Okay, so we'll leave the consent agenda the way it is, and then usually you have board members read 2 or 3 of them until we get to the end and then do the motion.
Okay. So we got a bunch here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. So let's all play nice. Andra, you want to do ABC? There's enough for everybody.
Okay, the first one is a motion authorizing Conservation Advisory Council and Town Council to prepare and send a letter to Cornell Real Estate relative to Lansing Orchards. Next one, resolution accepting dedication of spur extension of Woodland Park Road along roadway A to phase 4/phase 5 dividing line. And the third one is resolution appointing Sharon Jensen to the Lansing Housing Authority Board.
Okay, Brown, you want to do D, E, and F?
Sure. D, resolution hiring part-time constable for the Lansing Town Court. E, resolution hiring full-time information aide in the supervisor's office. And F, resolution scheduling public hearing for proposed local law number 2 of 2021, a local law to override the tax levy limit.
Okay, so G, H, and I. Doug?
G, resolution accepting resignation of Robert Jetty and appointing Leon Zaharis, did I say that right? To the Town of Lansing Advisory Committee on Power Plant Future. H, a resolution authorizing Director of Planning to execute a proposal to perform cable franchise renewal services and franchise fee audit with the Cohen Law Group. And I, resolution filing town planner position, authorizing filing of MSD 428, amending resolution 19-54, and reawarding lost vacation leave benefits.
Okay, Joe, you want to do the cleanup? J, K, and L?
J, resolution appointing town planner, a stormwater management officer, and amending organizational resolution number 21-59. K, resolution approving town of Lansing participation in a community campaign to lower resident energy costs. And L, resolution approving audit and budget modifications and supervisory report. And I'll move the consent agenda if it hasn't been already.
And I'll second.
Good.
Okay.
You're right in order.
Andrew Benson,
Yes.
Doug Dake,
Yes.
Bronwyn Losey,
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore,
Yes.
Edward Levine.
Yes. Agenda item number 18. Mikey, that's in, right? Okay. Someone like to entertain a resolution creating motor equipment operator, MEO/water/sewer maintenance worker title in and for the town of Lansing.
I'll move that.
I'll second it. Any further discussion?
Andrew Benson,
Yes.
Doug Dake,
Yes.
Bronwyn Losey,
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore,
Yes.
Edward Levine.
Yes. Number 19 in your packet is the resolution authorizing purchase by lease/finance of case CX 160D excavator and case 650M crawler dozer. Also move. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Mrs. Munson?
Andrew Benson,
Yes.
Doug Dake,
Yes.
Bronwyn Losey,
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore,
Yes.
Edward Levine.
Yes. Thank you, Mike. That was great research, by the way. Saved us a lot of money. Much appreciated.
Thank you to guys.
Yes, thank you, Guy.
When can we just stand? Can I stand up?
Yes, and stand up. Is your back hurting? Do you want to take a break?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Now we're on to item 20 in the packet, which is board member reports. Andra?
Now that I stood up, okay.
This must be really important.
I did comment on the two other committees, well, the library and the Lansing services. But I also, of course, attend the Conservation Advisory Committee. And as you know, we've been working on the National Natural Resources Inventory, and it's almost done. We spent a lot of time, but I think it was well worth it. And then I also attended the Environmental Management Council meeting. And I just want to report, we had two excellent guest speakers. One was the head of Tompkins County Reuse, Diane Cohen, and actually said that they've asked for a hiatus of 4 weeks, but nobody donate anything. And it's because there's a little bit overwhelmed as people during the pandemic clean their houses. And then the other speaker was Simon Skolink. Hope I said that right. And he's president of the New York State Association of Conservation Commissions. And he was pretty interesting. And he also is pretty proud that Tompkins County has the EMC, and we all, and town of Lansing has a CAC. So that was really nice, because not every town has that, and not every county has the Environmental Management Council. So it was good meetings. Thank you.
Rowan, you're next. You don't have to stand if you don't want to. It's okay.
The broadband committee, you heard most of it in the presentation earlier, and I imagine I'll let Joe fill in any holes there. Otherwise, the Cayuga Lake Watershed Intermunicipal Organization, which has changed its acronym to QUIO, was a lot of talk about the TMDL, and I followed up with that with CJ, and we're looking on what comments can be made to advocate for the town, because it seems like the proposed TMDL is a bit challenging to understand, and it's not really clear exactly what is being asked of towns and residents, and how we would support people in doing what they want us to do. So CJ is going to work on that as and submit something as planner. And that's all that I have had this month, actually.
Thank you. Doug?
Well, with regards to the planning board, I'm sorry I wasn't able to attend the Water Sewer Advisory Board meetings. I was actually working with my hands at that point. So I couldn't do that. But anyway, I'll be brief as I can. From the 5/24 meeting, May 24th meeting, we passed the public hearing with the public hearing and the resolution for a special use permit for 320 Peruval Road. That was part of the initial conversation. We have an addition approval of a community rec center food pantry down along East Shore Drive. That was passed. We also had a resolution and a preliminary and final resolution for the liquor store next to the Lansing Market, which passed. Cayuga Cliffs with a minor subdivision, and we had approval for that with a minor subdivision. Asbury and Collins Road was a negative declaration on the seeker and moved it to resolution and passed, as well as Wilson Road had a neg deck on a seeker, and that was approved as well. Another project on Hillcrest Road, Hillcrest with the neg deck and approval. We had a presentation from Marabato, and from what I saw, the tanks were moved under. Well, what they proposed was the tanks would be moved underground. This is for the propane or the steel storage behind the market. Satisfied many concerns, as I heard, or that was a quote from one of the planning board members. And there's a possibility of a preliminary approval. Floyd Davis, up just past the bridge, the state bridge, it's out right now. Major subdivision has some technical difficulties. And then Scott Morgan brought forth a couple different projects for Meadowbrook Apartments down at Cuba Vista and up at his facility now. Those are still pending. As far as this past Monday, Village Solars this past Monday, we had a working meeting, but Village Solars came forward with a pathways revision proposal. They pushed it to the next planning board meeting. Actually, Pat pushed it to recommendation to next planning board meeting, and then the town board meeting possibly in July if it's accepted. And we talked about the Cougar Lake scenic byway. Along with that, we talked about future commercial development and possible moratorium with regard to the RA. And the planning board came back pretty much unanimously against the moratorium. So that's what I got.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Joe?
Okay, I think Doug did a great job talking about the May 24th planning board, so I won't repeat that. And again, we covered the broadband committee. It was very similar to the presentation we got tonight from the Cohen Group. And I'm glad that the board was able to move forward on that. On the county broadband committee, I want to talk about that a little bit because that has changed since our initial approach. My understanding was that the county was going to share much more of the information with us than they've decided they're going to. And so that committee's function has pulled back a bit. We're going to assist the county in obtaining data when necessary. And we've been doing that. I know CJ and I have both been passing on information. We'll be reviewing comparables prepared for the study's completeness and accuracy, and when appropriate, disseminating to the constituents key findings of the study, but we're not necessarily going to get all of the study released. Some of it is going to be considered proprietary and the county's going to hold on to it. And so I wanted to bring that before this board and make sure everybody's feeling comfortable with continuing with this, because it is a little different than what we presented and what we agreed to when we agreed to pay, I believe, $5,000 towards the study. And so I just wanted to get a feel whether people are feeling uncomfortable that we're not going to be sharing as much of the information as I was led to believe at the beginning. And this certainly has been a change on the county's part, and they're acknowledging that they changed how much information they feel comfortable sharing with this committee.
Well, since you're on that committee, what are your feelings about it? Do you think you should still pursue it, or you think you need your be elsewhere? I mean, it's not like, so what do you personally feel about this? Because you're the one that's there.
I think we should continue with it. I think that the study is going to be the first step in the county really trying to create a county-wide broadband system, making sure that all the residents in the county are covered. I bring it to this group not so much because I am uncomfortable with it, but because things have changed, and I want to make sure the board's comfortable with those changes as I become aware of them.
How does any of the other board members feel?
I guess I trust Joe's judgment. I don't think 5,000 is really an outrageous number to spend to be part of it.
Anyone else?
Isn't
Go ahead.
Isn't the information public?
No, some of it's proprietary. For example, they've got listings from all the different cable providers as to exactly which houses they cover. That's considered proprietary. That's not foilable, and nor is it going to be shared with the committee members. That's just an example.
It's odd. It seems odd to me. I don't understand.
What's their reasoning for that?
They're worried about the information becoming too public. They've signed confidentiality agreements with various entities saying they'll keep this information private. And then if they, give it out to, I think there's like 15, 20 people on this committee, it's hard for them to monitor the effectiveness of that confidentiality.
It's interesting that in our resolution to the town, we actually made a stipulation that our information can be made public. And I guess we've already paid the $5,000.
We have not paid the $5,000 yet.
Interesting. Well, do you think we're gonna get $5,000 worth out of this?
Yes.
Sometimes it's a small price to keep the lines of communication.
hmm
Now, is this a one-time fee or is this something that's gonna be done every year for $5,000?
This is a one-time fee for this study. I don't know what the next phase is going to be like. That's going to be the implementation phase, and they may come to the town and ask us to help with it. They may do it totally on county money. We won't know that until they finish this phase to understand what it's going to take to get broadband to everybody.
Well, I guess what we can do is that once we pay this money and see what they do with it, if they come back to us for another discussion, we can see if we got value or not. And I think that'll be the basis of that relationship. And if we feel good value, then our relationship should continue in that regard. And if the board feels it wasn't good value, then perhaps we should reconsider certain aspects of that commitment.
Sounds like more of a legal thing than anything at this point. Something with the information must be obviously proprietary, but a legal issue.
Well, I guess if there's any frustration or concern, you can just double down on Lansing. Keep driving forth on that.
Okay.
Because that seems to be moving forward.
Okay, so we'll continue with that. Thank you for your input. Bolton Point, we had our meeting and it's the usual information sharing. Planning board, again, I think Doug gave a quick summary, and I think we're going to get into that in the work session, so I'm not going to get into that too much now. I want to repeat the dedication ceremony for the Peter Wheeler plaque is coming up this Saturday at 10:30 a.m., and I hope people attend that. And lastly, I'd like to take a moment to thank Lynn Day for his years of service with the town. He's retiring now, and I think we ought to acknowledge the amount of work he's put into the town. He has been a very dedicated employee, and we appreciate it. And I want to wish him well on his future endeavors.
Good. Anything else, Joe?
I'm good for now. Thank you.
Okay, so a little wrap up here. I do my phone calls every morning, and of course I get to talk to Patrick. I got to catch him early at 6:30. But the good news is, Mike, you're not plowing snow, so I don't have to do my 5:30 call. I really appreciate that. Even though I find myself getting up at 5 o'clock anymore, my God, I think I'm a farmer. They probably go to 3, don't they? Yeah. So, anyways, talking, for instance, we'll go right down through the line. Talking to Judge Howell, because one of the things we are concerned about with staff. He seems to be okay with Melody there for right now. He has enough help. That's all good, even with opening back up here to court. We'll move down the hall to Patrick. He's swamped. Business is good in Lansing, and Weirshire Park was twice as big. And we're having a talk, I think, at 10 o'clock tomorrow with the residential center again. And we're going to pursue that and see where that goes. So that's on the books. Is that right, CJ? Is it 10 o'clock, I believe? Yes, it's on my calendar. Okay, thank you. And once again, he's busy. You look at the figures probably for June, you'll see what it is for pavilions, you'll see what it is for camping, you'll see everything else. We just hired Ty Todd, 20 years old. So our team got a little bit younger, and it was a good addition. And we're always looking for good people to work here that give the town value. Moving up the road, I'm absolutely delighted that the mechanic position has been filled and the other mechanic / mower / MEO / whatever else we can get out of this guy done, because we recognize that we're proactive. We recognize that job is so much paperwork now that it's not a one person show. So it's excellent. Then we'll swing over to the other, which is the planner code officer. We have a new roster. Talking to CJ, When John comes on board, all 4 employees will be less than 2 years there. But CJ now has the team she wants in place. And once again, thank you, Lynn, for your dedication. It's not easy setting parameters, especially if you're a code officer. You know, nobody likes the word no, but to his credit, he always tried to give them different ideas on how they could still do it and accomplish that goal, just in a different way if what they offered didn't work. So anyways, you know, kudos for him. But anyways, I'm delighted I got to meet Scott, and we'll meet John later, and have a whole new crew there, which is fun. So we have a lot of different transitions here. Fortunately, we're very stable in the clerk's office right now, and between the 3 and 4 of them, life is good. So I think we're in great shape. Let's slide over to sales tax. April's was outstanding, 50% more than compared to the month after that from last year. We're already up $55,000 compared to the first 4 months. And as you drive by any store or restaurant, you see what I love to see are cars. They are there, and they are going all over the place. And we see it also from the Air Service Board, which I'm on for the Tompkins Ithaca Airport, is that people are flying all over the place now. So life is good right now. We're in a great position to do a lot of stuff. We started filling out the ARP, I believe, the money from the federal government. I think Lansing gets 1.28 of that. We started the process today. Guy, we sent you some information for translation on that. And we will move forward, at least for the application. We don't know what the distribution is from the 1.28 over 2 years, what percent of that goes to the village of Lansing, but obviously we will do what we can to facilitate that and move forward. So Lansing is not being reactive, we're being proactive, or we're in a great spot. Nothing greater than see all these little kids out here running around, you know, it's a good sight. So that's where we are now. So financially, and as far as emotionally and from a morale standpoint, Lansing is getting bigger every day. And I'm very proud of all the different employees who did that. So having said that, do we want to take a break or do we want to jump right into work session?
Great.
We want to break. So let's take a 5-minute break and we'll be back to start our work session, okay? You have the helm, Mrs. Munson.
Are you there, Guy?
Yes.
I just had a curiosity. Could the town put together a program in which it helped cover the expense of running the cable from the road to the house for houses that are exceptionally far from the road? Or would that be considered a discriminatory type thing?
Generally speaking, you couldn't do it because it's for the benefit of an individual as opposed to the town generally. The town could manage a fund that is, there are ways to do it, i.e. through districts, through grants, through whatever, but generally speaking, you'd have to do it correctly. But I'd really have to look pretty deeply at what type of district or process would be required to expend public money for what is, in most respects, an individual benefit for one landowner as opposed to another.
Right, okay. I just wanted to know if this was something that was conceivable or whether it was too far off the charts. And you're saying it's going to be work. And
Well, I think you can do it simply because there are some special statutes and some New York State grant-based and other initiatives to support broadband for the public purposes of education, serving underprivileged communities, for a whole bunch of purposes that are public. You'd have to look and make sure you tied to those specific purposes and stayed consistent with town law and Article 8 of the Constitution. So
okay,
there is a public purpose there, but you'd have to build the system to specifically meet those rules.
okay,
So I'm saying, I think you can do it. I just don't think it's a matter of, okay, we adopt a policy. I think you'd have to follow some very specific guidelines, most likely arising under, NYSERDA or any of the organizations that are currently funding or trying to fund broadband and infrastructure improvements.
right. Well, I'm looking at that big pot of federal money and I'm knowing it's fairly selective as how the town can spend it. And broadband connection is one of the big categories that's there. So I see it as a potential way that the town can use some of that money if we're having trouble filling it with all the other possibilities, which are not that numerous.
Right. I mean, one of the questions that you'd have to work around, although broadband is of a different character than cable services or telephony or other types of information services. But if a public service is, if a public need or a public justification for the expenditure of public money for individual benefits is justified for a high-speed or broadband connection, couldn't you equally make the argument that it's justified for a cable connection? And do we want to start subsidizing people's private cable connections to their homes? Well, maybe so, maybe not, but you'd have to look at how to do it.
Mhm.
Because right now, cable really is the middle mile solution. So I don't know how you do one without the other, but the committee can look at that and I can give them, the references or the laws or dig up that information. So, they can start doing it. Plus now we have a consultant that's an expert on this stuff. You might want to ask the Cohen Group.
Okay.
Because that's right in their ballpark.
Mhm. Yes. Okay. That's a good idea. Thank you.
Yep.
Are we live?
Yes, that's on my computer.
Yep.
Okay, so let's go to the working session. Discussion of development moratoria on business uses in the rural ag zoning district. Anybody want to lead off?
Well, I know CJ talked to all of us individually, and I'm not sure if this was supposed to just be in the rural ag district or in the rural ag district as well as the byway overlay district. And I would say that I am concerned that in order to do the rezoning, it is going to take us a long time to do the work. You know, we talked about this back in March, and we thought we could pass a overlay district quite quickly. And what I'm seeing the planning board do is take a lot of time to really think through a lot of the issues involved in order to create a thoughtful overlay district, because there's a lot of detailed questions that really need to be answered everywhere, from exactly what is the district lines to, you know, what kind of changes would you make in this overlay district. And I'm concerned that we are going to end up with a bunch of development that doesn't fit the guidelines that we eventually come up with. And so I've been interested in creating a moratorium to give us the time to work out the details so that we can match our zoning with the comprehensive plan. I know the planning board was mostly talking about a moratorium in the RA district. I don't think they really discussed specifically the overlay district. They thought that the RA district was far too much of the town to create a moratorium on. I think they also didn't realize, when I was reflecting back, that we weren't talking about all commercial. My understanding is it would be limited to commercial over a certain size, you know, maybe 1,000 square feet to 1,500 square feet, something like that. And so I know that wasn't discussed. And so I'm not sure they understood exactly what was being proposed. And so there's my initial thoughts.
Okay, Doug, were you at that meeting, that working meeting also?
I was.
But what was your impression of that as far as their knowledge pertaining to the moratorium?
Well, my impression was that a lot of the overlay district, and I know CJ put a barrier on a map of, I believe, 2,500 feet, which they all basically thought was a little too much, and I might agree. But that was just a line on a piece of paper that a start, so it doesn't have to land there. My concern with the RA is that a lot of that, the Cuba Lake Scenic Byway, is along the RA, especially in as you get further towards King Ferry. And basically on the other, you know, once you get past, you know, the top of the hill above the school, Lansingville Road and such. So, I mean, that's all RA. And it's been my impression, especially back to the comprehensive plan talk, that the RA, that the farming committee that actually presented what their thoughts were that they really don't want to change the RA, at least at the time, because they want to do what they want with their land. And I guess that was my understanding at the time. As far as development up and down along that property, especially as we get closer to South Lansing, let's say from Myers Road all the way up to 34 South to Ithaca or East Shore Drive. That was all basically somewhat of a commercial zone, as I recall. Now, I could be wrong. Commercial / business / whatever we want to name it. So the fact that it's part of the scenic byway, which is, I believe, relatively new. I mean, within the last 7 years, 8 years, whatever it's been. I don't know where else in Lansing are we going to put commercial business. I mean, are we gonna are we trying to get it out towards the center of town, in the town center, which I assume will eventually become pretty well regulated with regard to certain things. But I guess we can't have it both ways. So that's my feeling on it, and understanding, and back to, commercial development from, say, the houses in front of, the salt mine and Cuba crushed stone, on that side of the road, the lake side of the road, from there up to the corner is commercial. I believe it's business or commercial. So, I mean, I don't know, I know we can, CJ's brought up a lot of great ideas of, certain controls with, architecture and things of that nature. I know that the planning board's pretty much sided with I believe Larry Sharpstein, with regard to site plan review. I mean, in the teeth they want to put into it, and whether or not we give them that, the town board gives them that okay, that's, I guess, up to us. But I think I think they feel they can control this better with site plan as opposed to zoning. And once again, I mean, I've said it before, I think, but a lot of people have been, a blanket zoning code is fine, but one zoning code doesn't necessarily fit all things, similar to the lake side, or the Lake L1 district, for instance. So that's my understanding. That's a brief understanding of what I think the town board or the planning board was looking at.
Okay. Browman, do you have any thoughts?
Yes, I have lots of thoughts. I think that there would be a value in doing a moratorium, because right now our zoning is very, this area is commercial, and so commercial is okay. And to switch from that to what I am hearing people really wanting, which is form-based zoning, which is what things can look like in an area, isn't just quickly changing a zoning. It's a longer process. And I think we can also be creative with what we can do, like an overlay district and things like that. And I think buying ourselves the time to do that right is really valuable. I would propose, in my talk with CJ, I was saying I would propose that we do a moratorium on commercial in the Cuba Lake Scenic Byway overlay just for 6 months, just short. And so we just buy ourselves a little bit of time to get this process that we're moving forward on done. So it can go through what the process that needs to go through to happen well. And then have the one on the rural agricultural be a little bit longer, but we've already got the overlay and we've already started thinking and moving that process along. The other thing that I'm hearing again and again is people saying, I moved to agricultural because I thought it was agricultural, and not realizing that it means anything goes. And so I think if we were to look at the RA zone and make it match what the use actually is, and make it match what people really want it to be better, that we'd be in better shape as a town, and there'd be less upheaval every time something is going to be built, because what people want there is what's being built there.
Okay. Anything else?
That's all right now.
No, sounded like a good thought. Andra?
I agree with both Joe and Bronwyn, and also some things Doug said. I agree in personal property rights, that you own property, you sort of have the right to do with it that you can't, that's legal. But I would like the rural agricultural district to stay agricultural as much as possible. And I see it being eaten up like everything imaginable, from the solar farms to a dollar store to, you know, lots and lots of stuff. And it really pains me to see that happen. And I think we have to think in the long term and not the short term. And I think that's what we've been doing, short-term thinking. And, oh, this is so good for Lansing, and oh, it's gonna bring in more tax dollars. Well, maybe it isn't so good for Lansing, and maybe it's gonna ruin the town. And so I'd like to see a moratorium definitely on in the RA section, along the scenic byway, or I wouldn't be against the whole RA section having a moratorium on building, except maybe houses. I don't think rural housing, individual housing is going to upset things very much. And as far as the commercial part, that doesn't bother me too much. If it's on commercial, I think but again, with a lot of thought and planning and putting up beautiful buildings, I think that's okay. But I definitely want to see a moratorium in the RA district.
Okay, anything else? So the Ag Committee met for a few years, and they came up with their proposal, suggestion, recommendation for the Ag Zone, which is a new zone. And that seems to be in limbo right now. And once again, this is a conversation. This is not any criticism towards anybody. But, you know, we worked hard for that for a couple of years to get the impact from the farmers, right? You were there, that wanted it in that zone. And I don't know where the status of it is. Maybe that, as I talked about this a few months ago, that might be something that gets pushed through first because they've already had a recommendation. Maybe it has to have the planning board's eyes on it, and then it will go to the town board. So there is progress being made already. And that was the direct input of the farmers because it was their land. And the general consensus at that time was that they didn't want real estate out there because it would eat up a lot of farmland. They wanted to have more density in the other areas where they had the infrastructure and to keep it farming. So there's a whole different dynamics going on here. The thing with a moratorium is that, okay, you put a moratorium in place, you have to have an action plan that you're going to have results afterwards. And is 6 months enough time to do that or not? I don't know. Doug may remember this, or he may have come on after this was done. But when I came on board in, let's see, 2008, I believe, as a board member, we went through the zoning, and a lot of it was zoned out. And you're going to go through the ZBA. And a lot of different things, Guy might remember this, we put a lot of things in there with site plan control. So it was under site plan review. And the planning board, as you can see with the Dollar General up in, I guess soon to be up in North Lansing, they had tremendous site control over how they wanted to do it, but it was allowed. And when you zone something out, it's out unless you want to go to the ZBA and do a hardship. But then again, with the farmers, we have to be careful, like with any landowner, that we don't zone things out, especially when there have been talks already about leasing their land for solar or other things, when that's already going in, because then, as we know, that's a taking. And we have to be careful with that. My personal opinion is I'd like to see the ag zone be put in place, reviewed first by the planning board to see if some of these concerns we have are already addressed in the ag plan as far as the ag zone goes. And the other thing is that we keep talking about these moratoriums when we really need to put our efforts into just getting these things done. Maybe with a new planner on board, maybe we can get this thing move a little faster. Brown, I think 6 months is optimistic. And after 6 months, where are we going to be? Because you're going to have it reviewed by the planning board. And they meet probably once a month, maybe twice a month for this. And then it has to go to the town board, but then we also have to have a public hearing on it. And then, so there's 2 months right there. So I don't know what the time frame of this is, but I get concerned because people are reactionary and they send things to us, which, okay, that's their right to do. But we just got more emails about noise now. We got more emails about fireworks now that people are setting off. And it's like, okay, you can't jump on everything because somebody sends you an email right away. There's a process that has to go through. I'm not in favor of a moratorium. Personally, I assume you put the energy and time to get this thing done. And it should be moving ahead quickly, you would think, for the planning board to review it and go from there. We've talked about this for what, 3 months, 6 months? Moratoriums. At first it was because we thought about the gas station, and now we do this. You know, if you want to have a limited amount, you know, out in that area, like on where Dollar Generals are, the people had no services out there. And these things pop up. You may not remember Mitchell Farms. Mitchell Farms was the Agway. Remember that before AgTrack came in. They're right up there towards King Ferry. That was a big Agway store up there at one time. They're out of business. You know, would people be upset if a new Agway was up there in that area? We'd have to zone that out. I just get concerned that we're overstepping here by zoning things out when really a lot of this is through site plan control. And the bottom line, CJ, correct me if I'm wrong, but if the planning board recommends certain things to be done and the applicant refuses, then the project dies. So they do have tremendous power as far as how they want to influence where things go to meet that community. That's all I have for right now. So maybe
If I can respond.
You want to go into executive session?
There's a part of me that doesn't like the way things are going and I don't know how to express it without,
Does this qualify for executive session?
no, it probably does.
Maybe.
I don't know. Without being disrespectful.
Venting?
Venting.
Venting under executive session? I mean, are you concerned about lawsuits? Pending litigation?
No.
Yeah, you want to chime in maybe, or CJ? Or Brownwood? I mean, well, let's go to CJ, the
Yeah.
guy. We'll circle back, okay?
Brown, I didn't want to interrupt Brown I think she was trying to say something.
I just wanted to say quickly, when we're talking about the timeline, if 6 months isn't enough of a length for a moratorium to get the byway overlay district done, then I think it's even more important to do the moratorium, because if 6 months isn't enough time, then it's not going to happen quickly. So I think we need to give ourselves a deadline, and I think we need to push it to happen quickly, because it's been talked about since I joined the board, I think. So it's been a while, but it's not been moving forward until recently. Like it has been moving forward, but we need to do it right. And so I think we need to give ourselves the time to do that.
Okay. CJ?
Okay,
Well,
oh, yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Let go, Joe. Joe, you go, then we'll go to CJ and Guy, okay?
I just wanted to correct a couple of things. An overlay district is not the same as changing all the zoning. What an overlay district does is it says, in this area, we're going to allow things that may not be allowed in the underlying zoning, and we're not going to allow some things that may be allowed in the underlying zoning. So it just sets a set of extra parameters for that area. It does not rewrite all the zoning. It's not the same as a zoning district. And my idea would be that this would be really at large scale commercial, and we can certainly, gear it so that it doesn't affect farm operations at all. That's not really in consideration. And I just want to emphasize that many of the farmers really want their land protected from large scale types developments. I hear that too. And I think part of the idea of getting this moving is to get some of the ideas that are in that ag plan that is in our comprehensive plan implemented, so that the RA zone gets split the way the comprehensive plan is talking about into two different zones, one with much more protection from development than the other. This is all in our comprehensive plan. It's all as a result of the farmers agricultural plan. And I'd really like to see that moving forward as quickly as we can, because this is the area where the most divisiveness is over development that comes in. And it's not over all development, it's over the larger size developments, the larger scale commercial. I look at the planning board list and there's a lot of things that are coming before them that nobody talks about. And they're real development changes. They're, small areas in which it gets split up for a number of houses. It's smaller scale commercial developments. And nobody comes about them. Nobody's complaining about the Lansing market expanding by a few thousand square feet to add a liquor store. Not one person came to the planning board and commented on it. But when you have a large scale commercial operation coming to the northern end of Lansing, that's when people are upset. And I want to put brakes on that kind of development so that we can decide exactly what we want and where we want it, and then open things up again. Thank you.
So when you say large scale, are you talking solar? Are you talking Dollar Generals? Are you talking, what are you talking? Talking retail?
I think solar is largely off our table because the state has preempted us on that. I'm talking about commercial developments as in retail developments, because that's generally what we're going to have control over. I would put more control over solar if I thought we could, but the state really isn't going to let us.
So are we talking about wineries and breweries and things of that nature?
I think we're putting a brake on anything over 1,500 square feet so that we have the time to answer those specific questions.
That's the size of a house.
Yeah, it's enough to allow,
So if
make it 2,000 square feet. It's enough to allow many of the projects the planning board's looking at right now. The addition to the rink for the food pantry, the addition for the wine store, the subdivisions they're looking at, all that would be fine under this. It's the larger size projects that I want to put the brakes on.
So Guy, do we need to go to closed session for advice on this, or do we share this publicly? I mean, we talked about this before, what the pluses and minuses were on this. Do you feel comfortable commenting on this openly, or should we go into closed session for advice?
Well, that's up to you what you want to do. This is advice that's been provided 7 or 8 times in the past 2.5 years. There's nothing new. It's the same calculus, it's the same formula, and based on the discussion tonight, you're not actually discussing a moratorium, you're discussing 2 moratoria. So I mean, if there's specific questions, go ahead and ask them. But I was asked to draft a moratorium with particular parameters, but it wasn't specific to one particular item. I didn't know what the specific goals that were going to be pursued were, nor the length of it. And the discussion that led up to it was discussing zoning changes, moratorium in an overlay district that hasn't yet been defined, but there is a rough map for. Moratorium on businesses generally, then the sort of nebulous conceptual concept of formula-based businesses, which roughly identifies about 85% of all business in North America right now. But regardless, you can create a definition. You just can't really regulate that under zoning because you're regulating the owner and how the business operates, not the impact of the land use. But, you know, maybe Lansing will figure out a way to do that when no one else has. And you're really just going down these same paths. So what I created was, I looked at the types of things that were set forth in the comprehensive plan and the discussions that occurred relative to the different types of potential ag zoning. I looked at the ag committee stuff. I expanded beyond business because there's a lot of uses that are in Schedule 1 that are outside the business listing that really are sort of commercial, industrial, utility scale type events that are just as deleterious to farming or zoning for farming and agricultural uses as are retail. And I looked at the scoping of something like that, considering that the mapping has been done, though it's not final. that some of the purposes for splitting it into two zones has been examined, though it's not final, and figured that realistically you needed at least a year. That's why I settled on that timeline. My bigger concern is that we're depending upon where you want to slice the loaf, we're either 4 weeks into detailed discussion on various types of moratoria and zoning changes, or 2.5 years into detailed discussions on various types of moratoria and zoning changes. And when I was asked to draft something, I didn't really have the input. So you have a draft, but it still needs to be scoped. There still needs to be an understanding of what is going to be stayed and or prohibited. We need a durational aspect. And you really do have to identify what it is that you're going to do in the interim. What is it you're going to accomplish? And to be clear, a zoning overlay district is a zoning district. So that's why it has taken longer than one would normally think, because if you're going to build it over top an existing district, it does the same thing that zoning does, being when you build it over top an existing piece of land. It adds further allowed and not allowed uses and types of reviews to such uses that may be allowed. So it is a simpler type of zoning tool than a true zoning law, because you can only build it if you've already got the ZBA rules and all the things that are mandated. But it is a zoning district. And if not built correctly, it can be a disaster. It can actually have the exact opposite impact than that which is intended. But if you're talking about two moratoria, and in very large part, they're going to significantly overlap for the great part of their extent, I'm starting to question whether or not this is really advancing the goal of land use planning in the town, or is it doing something else? But that's not my department, and I'll leave that be. The planning board looked at that and made a determination, and maybe they were informed, maybe they were not, and maybe you will agree or disagree with them. But if there's going to be a second moratorium, I would ask for, what is it that you want to prohibit, for how long, and what will you definitively accomplish during that period? Because if the net effect before the moratoria and after the moratoria is going to be no change, then you've taken away property rights, albeit temporarily, for no good reason whatsoever. And once you open this door, it is not as easy to close as you think it is. So I would just urge caution, because you are, although theoretically, temporarily, you are suspending people's property rights. So it needs to be done with a fair amount of scoping and a real understanding of the impact that's going to have, particularly on people that might already have plans in place. No, they may not be vested rights, but nonetheless, they're still citizens of the town.
CJ, you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. Since Ed asked me to jump in here, given that we're just a couple days from the halfway point of 2021, I think that it could be prudent to just step back and take a look and just say that, you know, one of the things I wanted to do coming on board is make sure that we are consistently performing well in regards to interfacing with the public, interfacing with developers, interfacing with the town's other consultants and staff. And then we also have a degree of regulatory certainty for both the public and applicants. And to a degree, I think that we've made some changes there to improve in many of those areas. So while there are elements of the land use regulation, I would certainly like to have a more, shall we say, expeditious approach to that has not always been feasible. And I appreciate this board's patience. So since March, since our first conversation relative to moratorium, have used the working meetings, so 3, I think it's consecutive months, to use the planning board working meeting to really talk about the design and architectural and land use planning elements that the planning board would like to see. And so through a series of conversations and presentations and maps and just conversation and kind of chat with them to kind of understand what they're looking for. I hear a strong desire for design review, specifically in respect to scale and massing of new buildings, that they want to see pitched roofs. They want to see standards for landscaping buffers, circulation access and parking, heights dependent on slope. And in some areas of town, emphasis, although perhaps all throughout the town, an emphasis on quality materials, regardless, I believe, of the use of the buildings. So I'm also hearing a desire for destination properties relative to tourism and support of micro enterprise. But what I'm really hearing is this desire to focus on the rural agricultural zoning district, the work previously completed by the Ag Committee, work in the Ag Plan, as well as the Cuca Lake scenic overlay district. That has proved to be somewhat challenging. Strangely enough, there are not a lot of scenic overlay districts to work off of. But there are some good ones out there. The Hudson Valley was one of the earlier pioneers of that type of zoning work. I try not to do too many plug and play solutions, but obviously we want to tailor this to the town, and that does take some time and consideration of all stakeholders involved. But I believe I'm getting a pretty clear consensus on what the planning board would like as far as action. Now, that said, I did hear strangely consistency completely from this town board that you'd like to see a moratorium move forward, more or less consistent from this board, about a moratorium, maybe save for one or two members. But I did hear resoundingly from the planning board that they did not favor the moratorium, but perhaps it is because they are beginning to, I think, step into the power of a site plan and really embracing those tools, which though are, I would say, somewhat nebulously articulated in the existing land use ordinance. You know, if you look at the site plan review section of the code, it does give the planning board fairly broad latitude, which we've been able to bring in to some of the reviews in town. Perhaps you've seen them reflected in the recent retail store on Auburn Road, as well as the propane and LP facility, or petroleum bulk storage, facility on Town Barn Road. But that said, you know, I think we're getting to a really good point of understanding exactly what the board is looking for. But that said, I fully support, you know, this board's desire, if that is the case, to pass a moratorium. I've asked Guy to draft a document based on our conversation tonight. If that's the directive I received from you, I will go ahead and make those changes. I'll forward them on to county planning, get the referral from them, and start the clock running so that you can adopt it in July. So I would essentially ask for a recommendation directly from you on how you'd like me to proceed, and I will act accordingly.
I would just like to take a moment to say, CJ, I really appreciate watching you take a planning board that can get off in tangents and run all over the place when you start talking about general ideas, and then focus them back on the specific questions at hand. So you're able to take that general talk and refocus it and use it in a really skillful way. I think you're able to take those rambling discussions and find all the elements that are there, gather them up, and then repeat them and say, is this what you're looking at? And I think you've been doing a great job on that. And I really want to stop and compliment you on that, because it's not easy once the planning board starts talking in general ideas. They can go all over for hours if not slowed down. And you've been really taking that and turning it into a really productive use. I really appreciate watching that happen. And so I'll ask you a question, CJ. We've got two different areas that are of most concern right now, which is the RA, which needs to get split, and that's a lot of work, and I understand that. And we've got the Cuba Scenic Byway, which is the other area that gets a lot of attention and concern. What kind of timeline would you see on those? If you're just, as you are now, you've got extra staff, what would be the timeline to complete those based on your experience and vision?
That's a great question. And just to step back a moment, speaking about the staffing and the work plan, I do want to mention that our new planner coming on board, John Zipko, his experience is deep within development review. I was actually just mentioning this to Doug today. Oh, look, and there's Guy. You know, his job really, we want to begin to integrate more closely planning and building. He has credentials in erosion and stormwater control, and thus will be acting as a town stormwater management officer, which will really help supplement Scott in his role and allow him to really focus on enforcement. So that, of course, and then of course his emphasis on development review will free me up really for everything else, for all of the visioning and all of the grants and all of the real thinking that we want to do bigger picture, so that I'm not stuck in the development weeds here, where John frankly prefers to be. So it's a great match. So I would say that, I would echo Guy's comments about not wanting to have this go on forever and also be of a reasonable duration. I've also been advised by county planning. I spoke with them somewhat briefly, in confidence to say, hey, what would you advise on something like this through a 239 review? And they also concur with the year. I think a year and a focused moratorium on the rural agricultural zone will really allow us to rope in, we're talking, what is the land area? 65 plus, maybe 70% of the town's land area is the rural agricultural zone. And, I'd like to move away from this, as much as I get a kick out of the jokes about RA and reckless abandonment, and it's really cute and I get it, but it's also, we want to give all folks, our residents, people who want to invest in the community, a sense of confidence in our governance, that folks can come in and know approximately, what to expect. I'm not saying that zoning can always provide that. I'm not saying that zoning is a magic wand that suddenly solves every, civil issue that people have, between neighbors. That is wild suggestion that I would never make, and everyone here would probably laugh at. But I think that we're right on scope in terms of really focusing in on RA, really embracing its agricultural roots and celebrating those, and also asking businesses that want to come in there to reflect that architectural vocabulary that's existing, take the best of Lansing and let's codify it and make it into what we really want to see in the town. And I think that's what I'm hearing from people. I think that's actually what I'm hearing from the planning board, strangely enough. I never thought I would hear them suggest something like design review, but that's what I'm hearing from them. So I think that we've gotten to a really good place. Now, that said, though they may disagree with the moratoria, obviously we will comply with the town board's wishes, and we will, execute that and come up with a scope of work and timeline that really works for this low-hanging fruit that we all just discussed, which is the RA zoning district, the site plan design rules and associated design review, as well as any of the low-hanging fruit that we found from the zoning audit and the previous work done by the planning board, the ag committee, and the prior planning consultant, Mike Long. So there's a lot of really good stuff in there that we can bring to fruition if I have a lot of concentrated time to do that, not juggling development review. And yeah. So.
And to throw two more cents in, the suggestion and study of zoning change for the RA zone actually goes back to about 2008. And that was actually what was the ag committee was originally born out of a number of committees that split out of what was called a zoning and ordinance review committee, which created the town center committee. And we see some of the pieces of that work. Now, you can argue about whether or not 13 years is too long, or you can argue about whether or not 13 years is too short. But at the end of the day, you do need to understand that the relationship between the length of a moratoria and its ability to survive is an inverse one. The longer the moratoria, the more likely it is to be struck down. So once you decide, it becomes a bit of a yin and yang problem. And that is, if you don't have an exigent emergency that is required to create a moratoria, then what's your impetus to do it? Because you may be starting the clock running before there's an application. But on the other side of the coin, once there's an application, doing a moratoria starts to make it look like you're aiming at one particular parcel and not all of the parcels in the town. So understanding, and like I was using the word scoping, both as to the what it's going to affect. Is it a prohibition? Is it a stay? What is it? And you can define it in a lot of different ways, particularly if it's a land use moratoria and not a police power moratoria, though they certainly do overlap. And then scoping the duration of it, and very importantly, what you're going to accomplish during that duration. So there are generally very rare cases of moratoria that can last more than 2 years. That's pretty rare. Generally speaking, for basic land use changes, when you have existing zoning, a year is about the most. And when I looked at, when I got the directions and then followed up and got insight and had to basically make the determination on the length, and I looked at if there is the goal to create an RA and an R zone, or an A zone and an RA zone, whatever they may be tagged, and it's going to have elements of bulk and density and design review, and it's going to have elements of maybe even floating zones for some of the intersections, which sort of makes a little bit of sense if you understand how they work, that you have a lot of the tools already in your zoning, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. But it's not a short process. And most of the overlay districts are also in the RA zone. So the parts of the overlay districts that are not in the RA zone are in your town center area, which is proposed to have a completely different zoning and support development. So there's a tension there too that scoping comes into play on. And if you start to go town-wide on some level, then you're really not dealing with a limited scope anymore, and you start to create your own future problems and limitations. So my advice would be, if you're going to go down this road, it has been well-traveled before. And you either will see that I'm generally against moratoria. That's no secret, because I have a lot of experience with them and have learned over time that the amount of time and money and energy you invest into the moratorium, if you took all those resources and put it to the problem, you probably didn't need the moratorium. But there are rare cases where it is the right tool for the job. So the board needs to decide whether this is the right tool for this job. And then again, working with CJ, scoping. Make sure you get it tuned correctly and that your citizens have a right to appeal, even down to the point of who is the board that issues the waiver. There are a lot of organizational, I'm not sure what the word is. There's a lot of good organizational reasons for it to be the ZBA, because they're used to applying those variance type standards. But one of the things you're trying to prohibit is use variances themselves. So what happens? There are a lot of, if the moratorium is going to be based on Schedule 1, that's a pretty broad net, and you're going to catch a lot of things that may be unintended. For instance, if you're going to prohibit things that are subject to site plan review, special permitting, use variances, and PDAs, you've just taken all home occupations in the RA zone and put a moratorium on them. That's a scoping issue. I'm not sure if you understand what an agricultural zone is, that just stopping all home occupation review is necessarily the right move. But somewhere in that discretionary versus ministerial review function, you have to draw this line. And again, that's a scoping issue. So that's my 2 more cents, and I'll shut up and let you guys deliberate now.
Anybody else want to say anything?
I would. I would like to use our time to discuss that scoping. I think we've talked a lot about whether or not we think it's a good idea. And I'd like to look at what it would look like if we did it more specifically. Doug, I heard you say that definitely the size of the overlay district that you were looking at was way too big. Like, what would make sense there?
That's what the planning board said. The planning board had.
Right. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so I'd like to start getting down into those details a little bit, and decide if we're talking about 1 or 2, because we've talked a lot about whether or not we think it's a good idea, and I don't know that anybody's mind is going to be changed at this point. So I think we could move on to that discussion about the scoping to be able to do that while we're still awake.
Well, let me ask Guy a quick question. Let's say we paint.
Can her question be answered first, please?
Oh, sure.
Who answers that question? Is that a CJ question for scoping, or is that just a general statement?
I brought it up, but
it wasn't a question.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily hear it as a question, but I think what Ed heard is, how do we address the scoping? And based upon at least a rough timeline that I had reviewed in terms of laying out the project, the board really doesn't have to, you certainly can deliberate the scoping, but I think you describe what it is you want to prohibit and what it is you want to achieve. And then I think CJ and I can lay it out, and then you can fine tune it. But frankly, if you want to see what the scoping issues are, just look at Schedule 1. Because what the scoping is defined is it's stopping a review process, not necessarily prohibiting the use until the zoning change. So anything that's subject to site planning or special permitting, there's a whole scope that's built into this thing. Whether it's right or wrong, I don't know. There are some issues that probably need to be fine-tuned, because ironically, the RA issue is the only place where you allow adult uses, and a moratorium would prohibit all adult uses, and they're protected by the First Amendment. So we really shouldn't do that. So there are things that are going to be obvious that everybody's going to agree on. I don't know that you should spend your time debating it, but that's up to you guys. Scoping and understanding what the board or a majority of the board wants to do, and knowing that whatever it is you do has to be referred to the planning board as well. I think making sure that it's as narrowly tailored as possible, so you're impinging as few property rights as possible, is a valid goal. So I would say the first thing to do is really go through Schedule 1 and understand what uses are impacted and what uses should not be impacted based upon what the board's collective or majority vision might be for a prohibition or stay. That would be my answer to your implied question. So Joe, you had a question, so fire away, unless anyone else wants to give more input on scoping.
Well, quickly, I'd like to understand, we draw a line on the map and say, this is the area that we're going to do a moratorium on. And part of what we're trying to figure out with the moratorium is where that district ought to be exactly. And so when we're finished, we're going to cut out a bunch of that district, presumably, and say, this ends up not changing. Does that fit into your definition of taking property rights away from people needlessly, or is that part of the process and understandable?
Well, if you're going to split the RA zone, and let me focus on the RA zone, into 2 zones, and we have a map that gave a general outline of the initial thinking of the comprehensive plan, but it's not dialed down. It's not foreseeable once you start mapping the actual land where those lines may ultimately be drawn, given properties, creeks, highways, development pressure needs. I would envision that I mean, there's going to be an ag zone that's going to be more restrictive, and an RA zone that's going to focus more on residential and agricultural support-based businesses as opposed to any businesses. That's how I read what I saw in the comprehensive plan. Now, that's just my opinion, and I don't have a vote, so it really only counts what the 5 of you and the planning board think. So as to your question, it would affect, at least in my opinion, if you're going to go down that road, it would affect all of the RA zone, because all of the RA zone would be changed, not only because it might have overlay districts or be split into 2 zones, but because the overall allowed use, Schedule 1, assuming you say with that type of schedule, I have opinions on that I won't share here. But Schedule 1 is going to change in its entirety. And therefore, the potential is that it's going to affect the entire zone. If there is a use that you know is not likely to be affected, i.e. agricultural uses, 1 and 2 family residential uses, then you need to drop them into the exemption bucket. So I didn't go beyond 2 family residential because I didn't have any information on that. But if you exempt all residential, then what's going to stop someone from putting up a 4-floor, 300-unit apartment building, which I would suggest might be just as inconsistent with agricultural and farmland preservation as would a strip mall. So you have to decide where that balance is, and between CJ and your input in the planning board and even county planning, you try to find that balance. And if you find out you didn't get it right, then you amend your moratorium local law. But all of that takes time and energy away from your end goal. So it's really important to get it right on the front end.
So if I may comment, first thing I'd recommend is look at the ag zone, because that's something that the ag committee worked on for a long time. And those people were usually the major stakeholders in them. That's the first thing I would look at. I am not objecting to the scope of work or the time. I'm objecting to the fact that we have to freeze everything to do that with a moratorium. Because if you look at the timeline, this is what lawyers will look at. Let's see, we started talking about the overlay district, which really ramped up after when? There was a presentation from the Danny Minimum, and it was reactionary. Now we started talking about the overlay district, full steam ahead. Then we get the one email from one person, no disrespect, but now all of a sudden, now we get to look at the RA because something might go in there. Well, you already, as like I said, set out that the time frame for that. Now, what if that other person hypothetically already bought the land, and now all of a sudden it's frozen, and all of a sudden they can't do what they want there? Then I thought zoning was to be for property rights, to protect them, as I recall CJ was saying. And you've taken that one away. The other thing is that, once again, through site plan review, the thing with zoning, it's yes or no. With site plan review, you have ways to modify depending what the area is. And that's why we went over this in 2008 and 9 to give more options open there, but you still had the site plan review. To me, I think that the site plan review has tremendous influence on what goes in there and what doesn't. Because if they don't comply, it simply doesn't go in there. Once again, we can talk all night about these things. I'm just concerned, once again, that if you put the moratoria in place, multiple moratoriums, you're making the town vulnerable because, once again, look at the time frame and the actions afterwards. And you can go through the whole timeline of what's happened to you. And the other thing is that if I'm not going to pick winners and losers. If somebody is upset that another business is going in that's competition, isn't competition good? And what about those people in North Lansing who don't have anybody coming from the other direction to get their goods? I mean, they don't have a pilot out there. They're not an IDA. So I would strongly urge you to reconsider the moratorium or the moratoria, because once again, you basically set up what you're doing, and you may say it's not reactionary, but the facts may actually state it differently. Because what if, like I said before, what if somebody wants to do something now and they get froze up, or the person who wants to sell something? Just think of that very carefully going forward. And with CJ now being freed up, I think we can move a little faster on this if we have to get this thing done. That's all I have to say.
Ed, I just want to point out that I've been pushing this Cuga Scenic Byway for about 5 years now. It's not reactionary to any project that's come forward. It's something I talked about when we were writing the comprehensive plan. It got put into the comprehensive plan. CJ can attest that when she first came on, it was one of the first things I talked to her about, is something that I was very interested in moving forward. It's something I brought up repeatedly over the years. It's not a reactionary thing to any specific project. It is something I've been pushing for before any of these projects were under anybody's consideration. I just want to make that clear, that this is not a reactionary thing on my part in the slightest. And you can look at the facts, you can look at the history. This is something I've been pushing for a long time, and you've been there through all of it. So you've seen me push it onto the comprehensive plan and me talk about it year after year.
Brown, you had a comment?
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that we need to look, like you said, at the timeline starting in 2008, and to talk about how we've been talking about the ag district since then, and now we can do it really fast. I feel like if we were going to do it really fast, we could have done it a decade ago really fast. And so I think we need to do it now. And I think we need to give ourselves a timeline, because something always comes up, because there's really important stuff. And I think that for me, it's not reactionary to any one proposal at all. It's in reaction to the trend that's happening in town, and the idea that I'm not only here for the current residents, I'm here for the future of this town too. And I'm looking to what it's going to look like in 20, 30, 40 years. And that if we're just looking at what people right now find really important, then we end up not implementing stuff that really needs to happen. And so that's where my impulse for this is coming, that I want us to do this thoughtfully. And I think we just, now is the time. And so I guess reactionary in as much as there is development pressure happening, and I think we need to use this information that we've had and move forward with it.
CJ, you had a comment?
I was just kind of echoing the comment of a year. That is a reasonable amount of time to gather the information that we're looking to gather, host, get some public information sessions and engagements, create maps, go through revisions, refer this, and get it to a point where everyone is feeling pretty good about it, build on the work that was already done. And while I am loath to disagree with the planning board's sentiments, I support this board. You're seeing a lot of everyday constituency and their concerns. So if you would feel most comfortable, I would say I'd be looking for at least an informal recommendation from this board to get going on finishing that draft, so that we can get this in front of you and you can adopt it in July, if that's really what you're looking to do as far as a moratorium goes. So that's it for me.
I'm going to suggest a slightly different approach, because one of the things that has been changing over the last 5 years, say, is we have a fully operational planning department as of this month, in which we've got enough staff to actually do the kinds of things that we've been trying to do short-staffed for years. And I think that's been one of the things that slowed us down a lot, is asking people to do more than they possibly could do in the time period allotted to them. And so what I'm going to ask is, or suggest, is that CJ give us a timeline for the RA zone rezoning, for the Cuba Scenic Byway rezoning, so that we as a board can look at what she says is going to be a timeline for finishing those projects up and decide from there whether we need to do a moratorium, how long it would be, and all that at our next meeting. So we're doing this from knowledge. You know, CJ now will have the time to say, all right, in order to finish the byway, I'm going to need this many months with the planning board, then it's going to need this months with the town board and all that. And the same with the RA zone, which I agree is a very important zone. And we're like halfway there. We've done so much of the work. We need to finish it. And, you know, I'm not sure how much time CJ thinks, but I think she's got a good idea of how long it's going to take to work with the planning board to finish that up, and then how long it would take for the town board to approve it. And I think if we had that information in front of us, we would have the kind of knowledge we need in order to decide how to move forward in the best way possible. You know, if it's going to take a year and a half to finish one of these projects off, then maybe we're thinking about a moratorium. If she's saying I can finish this stuff by fall, then the moratorium doesn't make as much sense. So I think that would be the next step to really understand where we are. Does that sound like a reasonable thing for you, CJ?
I think it's a good suggestion. Jeff.
I think it's a great suggestion.
Because so many things are just being thrown at us. And it just seems like we gotta step back.
Once again, it goes back to what Guy said. You find yourself in the situation where you could do it with just regular, with the zoning. I mean, CJ could do this by herself. I know she wants the help with the planning board, but that's fine too. What do you think?
So it sounds like I'm hearing, yeah, well, I appreciate the confidence from the board. That's lovely. And I appreciate the sentiments. But that said, I want to make sure that we're, you know, reflecting this board's desires. You know, you're the ones that make the rules, right? So it's sounding to me like you're looking for a scope of work and timeline for both the RA zoning district that we just spoke about, the Cuba Lake Scenic Overlay District, as well as the site plan / design review elements, and maybe some of the little smorgasbord of things from the zoning audit, the low hanging fruit pieces. It sounds like that's what I'm hearing, that you'd like a scope as well as a timeline for, and it sounds like perhaps a staggered timeline for those projects.
Sounds like a good idea.
Okay.
We all have a consensus for that, at least go forward with that? Okay. Will that conclude our working session for tonight?
Yeah, we talked.
I'll do my best to get those to you. I'll do my best to turn those around to you. Hopefully early to mid next week, along with, I'm hoping to work on preparing the mid-year review for you as well. So I know it's been a whole year since we did the last one, if you can believe it. Time goes fast. So thank you.
Okay. Do we have anything for executive session? Okay, means adjourned.